A wealthy couple mocked me while I polished their shoes on the street for 10 pesos. Their spoiled son stole my piggy bank for fun. They didn't realize the street camera had recorded everything, and within 48 hours, the video had 10 million views. Dawn in the El Milagro neighborhood didn't arrive with birdsong, but with the honking of buses and the clatter of garbage bins. 8-year-old Santiago opened his eyes to the sound of dripping water. The roof was leaking again. He turned over on the narrow bed he shared with his father and saw him already sitting at the edge, pulling on his worn work boots. "Good morning, son," his father whispered, careful not to wake the neighbors through the thin walls. His voice was hoarse with fatigue, but still carried its constant tenderness. Their home consisted of a single room no bigger than a school classroom. The cinder block walls were painted a cheerful blue. His father had painted them last year, saying it made life feel lighter. The floor was covered in old linoleum, peeling up in the corners and bubbling in places. In the corner stood a small two-burner gas stove, next to a refrigerator that only worked sporadically and sounded more like a loud humming cabinet. But to Santiago, this was an entire world. It smelled of coffee in the mornings and fried tortillas in the evenings. On the wall hung his school photo in a homemade cardboard frame, decorated with colored pencils by his father. On the shelf were 3 books, the only ones in the house, and a small radio that played music on Sundays. "Papa, is it time already?" Santiago rubbed his eyes and sat up on the bed. Outside, dawn was barely breaking, but his father was already fully dressed. "Starting early today, son. They want to finish the foundation at the site before the rains come," his father explained, tucking a small thermos of coffee and a piece of bread wrapped in cloth into his pocket. "Eat what I left on the stove, and don't be late for school." Diego Moreno worked 3 jobs, and every day of his life was scheduled down to the minute. From 6 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon, a laborer at a construction site. From 3 to 9 in the evening, a supermarket security guard on the other side of the city. And at night, when Santiago was already asleep, he worked as a loader at the produce market, unloading trucks full of goods. Santiago watched as his father checked the contents of his old backpack, the security guard uniform neatly folded, a clean shirt and documents sealed in a plastic bag in case of rain. Everything was organized with the mathematical precision of a man who couldn't afford to lose a single minute or a single peso. "Papa," the boy paused, searching for the right words. "Why doesn't Senor Carlos from next door work, but he has a TV?" Diego froze while tying his laces. Santiago had asked this question before, and every time, something clenched inside his chest. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that the world is unfair? That honest work doesn't always lead to a decent life? That some people find easier, but darker paths to money? "You know, son," his father said, sitting down beside him on the bed, "every person chooses their own path. I chose to work honestly because I want you to be proud of your papa. Money comes and goes, but a good name stays forever." Santiago nodded, though he didn't fully understand these grown-up truths. He saw how his father came home exhausted every day, how his feet ached from long hours of standing, how he counted and recounted crumpled bills before setting some aside for food and utilities. "When I grow up, I'm going to work and help you," the boy said earnestly. Diego smiled and ruffled his son's hair. "You're already helping me, son. By doing well in school, listening, not causing trouble. And when you grow up, you'll become a doctor or an engineer, and you'll live a better life than your old man." Outside, the voices of neighbors drifted through the thin walls. The neighborhood was waking up. Women hung laundry on clotheslines strung between homes, children ran to Don Manuel's store to buy bread on credit until payday. The sounds of radios blended with barking stray dogs and the honking of minibuses. El Milagro, the miracle, they called their neighborhood, half-jokingly. Houses were packed together like card houses, ready to collapse in the first strong wind. The streets were narrow, many unpaved, turning into rivers of mud after the rains. Electricity went out regularly, water flowed on a schedule, and garbage was collected whenever someone remembered. But the place had a spirit of its own. Neighbors knew each other by name, shared their last piece of bread, and looked after each other's children. Music played on every corner, and in the evenings, old men played dominoes right in the street, arguing about football and politics. Diego stood up and walked to the door. On the threshold, he turned back. Santiago, remember, we may be poor, but we are rich in love. And that's the greatest wealth in life. The boy watched his father disappear around the corner. Then he got up and went to the stove, where a small pot of oatmeal with a piece of sugar was cooling, their usual breakfast. Beside it lay his notebook with yesterday's homework, done under the light of their single bulb. In an hour, he would go to school, an old building with peeling paint and desks carved with names from generations past. There, Señora Carmen would tell stories about faraway lands and great people, and he would dream of one day seeing the world beyond El Milagro. Santiago didn't yet know the trials that awaited him, the ones that would turn an 8-year-old boy into a strong man. He didn't know about the debts hanging over their family like a sword of Damocles. He was simply eating oatmeal and getting ready for a new day, believing that his father's love and honest work were all he needed to be happy. Outside, the sun was already shining brightly, promising another hot day in the neighborhood that, despite its name, had long since stopped believing in miracles. It had been 3 weeks since that morning when Santiago asked his father about their neighbor Carlos. But the boy's thoughts kept returning to the question again and again, like a persistent fly that refused to be swatted away. Sitting at his school desk, Santiago mechanically copied numbers into his notebook, but his mind was busy calculating. Papa works from morning till night, 7 days a week. The construction site pays him 80 pesos a day. The supermarket, 50. The market, another 30 per night. That's... Santiago furrowed his brow, trying not to make a mistake. More than 4,000 pesos a month. To an 8-year-old, it seemed like a huge sum. But then why do they eat rice and beans every day? Why don't they have a television like the neighbors? Why does Papa count every single peso before even buying bread? Santiago Moreno. Señora Carmen's sharp voice made him jump in his seat. Would you care to share with the class what's so fascinating outside the window? I'm sorry, Señora Carmen, Santiago muttered, blushing and lowering his head. Laughter rippled quietly through the classroom. I was asking for the result of 450 divided by 15. 30, Santiago answered without hesitation. Math came easy to him. Correct. But next time, please be more attentive. After school, Santiago didn't head straight home like he usually did. Instead, he turned toward the Hernandez house, where Carlos lived. Carlos was a man in his 40s who, indeed, never worked. Yet he always wore new clothes and a gold chain around his neck. Carlos's house wasn't much bigger than theirs, but it looked completely different. A satellite dish on the roof, an air conditioner in the window, a shiny new motorcycle parked at the entrance. From the open door came the sounds of a Brazilian telenovela on the TV. Hey, kid! What are you staring at? Carlos appeared in the doorway, holding a can of beer in his hand. His stomach bulged under a tight t-shirt, and his gold teeth flashed in a grin. Nothing, Señor Carlos, Santiago backed away. Something about the man unsettled him, though he couldn't say exactly what. Where's your old man? Still working like a slave? Carlos's voice had a mocking tone. Yes, señor. Your father's a good man. Honest. Not many like him left, Carlos said, taking a sip of his beer. Then, in a quieter voice, he added, sometimes honesty's not the most profitable trait in our world, kid. Santiago didn't quite understand the words, but they stuck in his mind like a splinter. He said goodbye and quickly walked home, feeling Carlos's gaze following him. His father wasn't home yet, there were still 2 hours left in his supermarket shift. Santiago did his homework, ate some leftover rice warmed on the stove, and sat by the window to wait for his papa. That's when he saw them. 3 men were walking slowly down the street, and something about their movements made Santiago uneasy. They didn't look like the usual people from El Milagro. They were dressed too well, expensive jeans, leather jackets, gold watches. One of them kept glancing around nervously, another spoke into a mobile phone. They stopped right across from their house. Santiago crouched behind the curtain, watching. The men whispered to each other, occasionally looking up at their window. The boy's heart began to race. Who were they? What did they want? Half an hour later, they walked off, but the strange feeling of unease stayed with Santiago until his father returned home. "Papa," he ran to Diego the moment he stepped inside. "There were strange men outside today. Right in front of our house. They were looking at our windows." His father's face changed instantly. The fatigue disappeared, replaced by tension. And in his eyes, for just a moment, Santiago saw fear, quick, fleeting, but unmistakable. "What men, son? Can you describe them?" Diego's voice was calm, but his hands trembled slightly as he took off his work jacket. Santiago described everything he had seen. Diego listened silently, his face growing harder with each detail. "Probably just someone lost, looking for an address," he said at last. But his voice lacked conviction. "Don't worry about it, son." But Santiago had learned how to read his father's face. Something was wrong. Something his father didn't want to talk about. At dinner, once again rice and beans, with a bit of fried onion, Santiago finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had been gnawing at him for weeks. "Papa, why do we have so little money?" Santiago asked. "You work so much, more than anyone else in our neighborhood." Diego froze, his spoon halfway to his mouth. A long silence settled between them, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. "Life is a complicated thing, son," his father finally said. "Sometimes it's not that you earn too little, it's that there are obligations." "What kind of obligations?" "Grown-up obligations. You'll understand when you're older." It wasn't an answer, and they both knew it. Santiago could see how his father avoided his gaze, how his fingers tapped nervously on the table. "And those men today? Forget about them," his father snapped. Then, seeing the frightened look on Santiago's face, he softened. "I'm sorry, son. I'm just tired. Let's check your homework instead." But that night, Santiago couldn't fall asleep. He lay in bed listening to every sound outside the window. And around midnight, his suspicions were confirmed. A quiet knock on the door. Muffled voices. His father got out of bed and went to open the door, careful not to wake his son. But Santiago wasn't asleep. Through the crack between the door and the frame, he saw his father hand someone money. The very money he counted so carefully each evening. He heard fragments of conversation. "This should be enough for this month. Don't be late next time. The boy shouldn't have any problems." When the visitors left, his father stood by the door for a long time, leaning against it. In the dim light from the street lamp, Santiago could see how hunched his father's shoulders were, how heavily he was breathing. The next morning at breakfast, his father was unusually affectionate. He told funny stories from work, trying to make his son laugh. But Santiago looked at him with new eyes, the eyes of a boy beginning to understand that the world around him was far more complicated and dangerous than it once seemed. And with each passing day, the questions grew more numerous, and the answers fewer. Questions about money and the strange men had been troubling Santiago for a week. But on Saturday morning, something happened that temporarily pulled him away from his dark thoughts. His father didn't go to work, a rare occasion, caused by a delay in construction materials. "Son," Diego said, sitting down beside the boy on the bed, "I want to tell you something important. About your mother." Santiago froze. His father rarely spoke of his mother, and every time he did, it felt like a holiday, rare and deeply cherished. "Do you remember what I told you before?" his father asked, pulling an old shoebox tied with string from under the mattress. That she's a doctor working in Africa, Santiago nodded, scooting closer. That's right. But I've never told you the whole story, Diego said, untying the string with trembling fingers. You're old enough now to know the truth, to know what an amazing woman your mother was. From the box, he took out a yellowed photograph. In it was a young woman with shoulder-length dark hair and kind eyes. She wore a white medical coat and smiled gently at the camera. This is your mother, Valentina. Diego's voice became soft and warm. The most beautiful and kind-hearted woman in the world. When we got married, she was only 19, but she was already studying to become a doctor. Can you imagine? At such a young age, she already knew she wanted to dedicate her life to saving people. Santiago took the photo reverently into his hands. He studied her face, searching for something familiar, something of himself in her features. Do I look like her? He asked. You have her eyes, Diego smiled. And her stubbornness. When Valentina made up her mind about something, there was no convincing her otherwise. She worked at a small hospital here in our city, treating children from poor families. Many times, she treated them for free. She just couldn't stand to see a child in pain. Diego took out a few more items from the box, a medical pin, a small notebook filled with handwritten notes, and a baby rattle. When you were born, he continued, she was the happiest woman on earth. She carried you in her arms all day, sang lullabies, and told you stories about how one day, you'd grow up to be a great doctor. Why did she leave? This was the question that haunted Santiago the most. Diego's face turned serious. When you were 1 year old, a terrible epidemic broke out in a faraway country in Africa. Children were getting sick, dying in their parents' arms. The local doctors couldn't cope. So the World Health Organization reached out to the best pediatricians around the world, asking for help. Santiago listened, holding his breath. Your mom was one of the most talented, Diego said, pride resonating in his voice. They asked her to go and lead the medical mission. Can you imagine, son? Out of thousands of doctors, they chose her. And she said yes. Not right away, Diego shook his head. For 3 days, she cried, held you in her arms, and said she couldn't leave her little baby. But then, she saw dying children on the news, African children, suffering. And she realized she couldn't stay behind when she had the power to help. Diego stood and walked to the window, staring out into the distance. On her last night before leaving, she didn't sleep. She sat beside your crib and whispered, "Forgive me, my little one. Mommy has to save other children, but I promise I'll come back. I promise." When will she come back? Santiago asked, his voice full of hope. Soon, son. Epidemics are serious. You can't walk away halfway through. But you know she writes us letters regularly. Diego reached back into the box and pulled out a familiar bundle of envelopes, tied with a pink ribbon. Santiago had seen those letters many times. They arrived every year on his birthday, and his father always read them aloud, ceremoniously. Do you want to hear the last letter again, the one that came on your birthday? Santiago nodded so eagerly he nearly fell off the bed. He never got tired of hearing his mother's letters. His father carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the paper, filled with neat handwriting. My dear Santiago, Diego began to read. Mommy thinks about you every day and every night. It's very hot here in Africa, but I've gotten used to it. Yesterday I saved a little girl your age. When she got better and smiled at me, I thought of your smile and cried with happiness. I know you're growing into a smart, strong boy. Be good for Papa, study hard in school. Soon I will finish my work here and come home. Then we'll all be together, you, me, and Papa. I'll tell you so many stories about the children I helped that you'll want to listen to them all night long. Take care of yourself, my beloved son. Mommy loves you more than all the stars in the sky. With love. Your mama, Valentina. By the end of the letter, Diego's voice was trembling, and Santiago's eyes were filled with tears, not from sadness, but from pride and love. "Papa, can I take this letter to school? I want to show my friends what a heroic mom I have." "Of course, son. You have every right to be proud of her." That Monday at school, Santiago, as usual, told his friends about his mother. Today, he brought the photograph his father had allowed him to take for one day, and he nearly recited the last letter from memory. Some of the older students exchanged glances and smirked, but Santiago didn't pay them any attention. He was used to the fact that not everyone understood the importance of his mother's work. "My mom is saving children in Africa," Santiago repeated with unwavering pride. "She's the best doctor, and that's why they chose her out of thousands." Their teacher, Senora Carmen, listened with a strange expression on her face, a mixture of admiration and pity. "Your mother is truly a remarkable woman, Santiago," she said at the end of class. "And you must grow up to be worthy of her." At home, Santiago asked his father to show him where Africa was on the map. Diego pulled out an old school atlas and spent a long time explaining how far away it was from their home, why letters took so long to arrive, and what a difficult place it was to work. "You know, son," he said, closing the atlas, "when your mother returns, we'll throw the biggest party in the whole neighborhood. We'll invite all the neighbors, buy a cake, and you'll be able to show her what a smart and good boy you've become." "Will she recognize me? I've grown so much." "A mother always knows her child," Diego replied gently. "A mother's heart never makes a mistake." That night, Santiago fell asleep hugging the photograph of his mother tightly to his chest. He dreamed of a white airplane landing on a runway, and a beautiful woman in a white coat stepping out. She lifted him into her arms and said, "I missed you so much, my little hero." In the next room, Diego sat at the table under the dim glow of the lamp, writing another letter from Mama, wiping away the tears that fell onto the page. 2 weeks had passed since that memorable Saturday morning when Diego showed Santiago the photograph and read the letter aloud. The boy now carried a handwritten copy of the letter in his school backpack. He had memorized most of it, but he still loved reading it again and again. In the evenings, after his father returned from work, Santiago did his homework at the small table by the window while Diego cooked dinner on their two-burner stove. They usually ate together, talked about school and work, and made plans for the weekend. But that evening, his father seemed distant and quiet. "Papa, when will the next letter from Mama come?" Santiago asked, putting down his pen. "My birthday is still so far away." "Soon, son," Diego said distractedly, stirring the rice in the pot. "Letters from Africa take a long time, but Mama will definitely write." After dinner, Diego said he was tired and wanted to go to bed early. That was unusual. They usually sat up talking at the table, or Diego helped him with tricky math problems. Santiago also lay down in bed, but sleep wouldn't come. From behind the thin partition that separated their sleeping space from the rest of the room, he heard quiet sounds, the creak of a chair, the rustle of paper, the soft tap of a pen on the table. The boy grew curious. Maybe Papa was working on some documents. Or reading the newspaper. Santiago quietly sat up in bed and peeked through the gap between the partition and the wall. What he saw made his heart race. His father was sitting at the table under the dim light of the single lamp, hunched over a sheet of paper. He was writing something, pausing now and then in thought. Beside him lay a familiar envelope, exactly like the ones that the letters from Mama came in. Bluish paper, the same size, even the handwriting on the address looked familiar. Santiago shut his eyes and rubbed them. Maybe he was imagining things. He looked again through the gap. No, he wasn't imagining it. His father was carefully folding the letter, placing it into the envelope, and sealing it. Then he stood up, walked to the old cabinet, and hid the envelope on the very back shelf, behind some old books. "Papa?" Santiago couldn't hold it in and called out softly. Diego jumped and turned sharply. For a split second, fear flashed across his face, so quickly that Santiago almost missed it. Son, you're still awake, his father's voice sounded unnatural. I heard you doing something. What were you writing? Diego paused, looking at his son. There was a storm of emotion in his eyes, fear, confusion, something like guilt. I was writing a letter to an old friend, he said at last. We haven't spoken in a long time, and I thought. Why is the envelope just like the ones Mama's letters come in? The question hung in the air. Diego froze, and Santiago saw his father's hands tremble slightly. Just a coincidence, son. The store sells lots of similar envelopes. But something in his father's voice made Santiago doubt him. He had never heard his father mention any old friends before. And why was he writing to them at night, in secret? What's your friend's name? Santiago asked. What? Diego flinched again. Oh, right. Jose. His name is Jose. We worked together many years ago. And where does he live now? Far away. Very far from here. Diego quickly turned off the lamp and came over to the bed. No more questions, son. Time to sleep. You've got school tomorrow. But Santiago couldn't sleep. He lay in the darkness, thinking about what he had seen. Something wasn't right. Something about his father's behavior, the frightened look in his eyes, the way he hurried to hide the letter, it all stirred an uneasy feeling deep inside him. At breakfast, Papa was especially cheerful and talkative, as if trying to smooth over the strangeness of the previous night. He told funny stories from work, hummed along with the radio, and even let Santiago have an extra slice of bread with jam. At school, Santiago listened to the lessons absent-mindedly, his mind stuck on the scene from the night before. Señora Carmen even scolded him for not paying attention. But Santiago kept thinking about his father's frightened face and the identical envelopes. Maybe it really was just a coincidence. Maybe all the shops in town sold the same kind of envelope. But then why had Papa looked so scared? Why had he made up a story about some friend named Jose he'd never mentioned before? That evening, while his father was away working the evening shift at the supermarket, Santiago couldn't resist. He walked over to the old cabinet and carefully looked behind the books on the top shelf, the spot where he had seen Papa hide the letter. The shelf was empty. Santiago searched the entire cabinet, checked under the books, behind them, even flipped through the pages of old textbooks. Nothing. The letter was gone. Maybe Papa had already sent it. But the post office only worked during the day, and Papa had been at work all day. Maybe he hid it somewhere else. But why? Santiago sat down on the bed, feeling a strange unease growing in his chest. The more he thought about it, the more questions he had. And the fewer answers there seemed to be. Math was Santiago's favorite subject, and he was working through problems with focus when the classroom door suddenly burst open. In the doorway stood an unfamiliar man in dirty work clothes, his face dusty and his eyes wide with confusion. "Excuse me, Señora Carmen," he said to the teacher, nervously twisting a cap in his hands. "I need Santiago Moreno. It's urgent." The room went still. Everyone turned to look at Santiago, and he felt his heart jump into his throat. Urgent calls to school rarely meant good news. "Santiago, come here," the teacher said, and there was worry in her voice. The boy stood up, his legs trembling. The worker crouched in front of him, and now Santiago could see that the man's hands were shaking too. "You're Diego Moreno's son? The one who works at the construction site in Las Flores?" "Yes," Santiago whispered, barely audible. "My name is Carlito. I work with your father. Listen, kid, there's been an accident. He's in the hospital." The world seemed to tilt around him. The sounds of the classroom faded, muffled, and black spots danced before his eyes. "What happened to him?" Santiago asked, though the voice that came out felt like it didn't belong to him. "Back injury. A beam fell," the man said. "The doctors say it's serious, but but he's alive, you understand? He's alive and conscious. He asked me to tell you urgently, go to San Miguel Hospital. Señora Carmen came over and placed a hand on Santiago's shoulder. Go, my boy. We'll see you tomorrow. What if there is no tomorrow? Santiago whispered, and the teacher understood he wasn't talking about school. There will be, she said firmly. Your father is a strong man. Everything will be all right. But on the way to the hospital, Santiago couldn't stop thinking about the worst. What if Papa dies? What if he's left completely alone? Who will take care of him? Where will he live? And what about those mysterious debts his father never spoke of? The boy ran across half the city, but it felt like the hospital only got farther away. The buses were too slow, walking was faster. He raced past market stalls where they usually bought groceries, past the school for wealthy children, past beautiful houses with gardens. And everywhere, life was going on, people were working, laughing, dealing with their own problems. No one knew that an 8-year-old boy's world was falling apart. San Miguel Hospital greeted him with the smell of bleach and medicine. In the corridors, people sat or lay down, some groaning in pain, others quietly crying, some just staring blankly into space. Santiago had never seen so much suffering in one place. Diego Moreno, the nurse at the front desk repeated. Back injury? Room number 7, second floor. Santiago ran up the stairs 2 at a time. The room was large, with 8 beds, most of them occupied. He found his father by the sound of his moans. Diego was lying on his back, unable to move, quietly groaning from the pain. Papa. Santiago wanted to rush to the bed but stopped himself, afraid to hurt him. Diego opened his eyes. His face was gray and covered in sweat, but when he saw his son, a light of joy sparked in his eyes. Son, he whispered. I'm so glad you came. I was so scared that. What happened to you? Does it hurt a lot? A beam fell on my back. Very heavy. The doctor says, Diego paused, gathering strength. He says I damaged my spine. Nerves are pinched, muscles torn. But you'll get better, right? Santiago's voice trembled with fear. You will get better. I will, Diego said softly, turning his face to the wall. But I won't be able to work construction anymore. I can't lift heavy things. The doctor said there are medicines, treatments that can help, but they're very expensive. And without treatment, without it, the pain might never go away. Santiago felt something cold twist in his stomach. If Papa couldn't work in construction, their main source of income, what would they eat? Who would pay for their home? And what about those frightening men who came at night? How much does the treatment cost? He asked. A lot, son. Too much. We don't have that kind of money. Just then, the doctor entered the room, a young man with tired eyes and a wrinkled coat. He glanced at the chart in his hands and spoke to Diego. Señor Moreno, I've received all the test results. You have a serious injury, compression of the nerve roots, soft tissue damage, a partial vertebral dislocation. Surgery isn't necessary, but without proper treatment, you won't be able to return to heavy labor. What about light work? Diego asked. In a month or 2, with a course of anti-inflammatory medication and physical therapy. But lifting heavy objects, no. That could lead to paralysis. When the doctor left, silence fell over the room. Santiago looked at his father and understood, their life had just changed forever. Papa, he said suddenly, his voice firm, surprising even himself. Don't worry. I'll take care of us. Son, you're just a child. No. Santiago clenched his fists. I'm not a child anymore. I'm 8 years old, and I can work. I've seen how the kids in our neighborhood earn money. What kids? Diego asked cautiously. Well, They shine shoes, sell newspapers, wash cars. Honest work, Papa. I'll find something. Diego tried to sit up, but the pain made him groan. You have to study, not work. I'll do both, study and work. You said we're a team. That family always supports each other. You've supported me my whole life, now it's my turn to support you. Tears rolled down Diego's cheeks. He looked at his son and saw not an 8-year-old boy, but a little man, ready to take on the responsibility of their family. I know we're in trouble, Santiago continued. I saw the men who come at night. I know you give them money. I won't ask why, but I understand we need money. And I'll earn it. Promise me one thing, his father whispered. That you'll earn it honestly. That you won't stray from the right path, no matter how hard it gets. In our neighborhood, there are too many temptations, too many easy ways to make money, but they always lead to trouble. I promise, Papa. Only honest work. Just like you taught me. When Santiago left the hospital, it was already getting dark. He walked slowly, thinking about his new reality. Starting tomorrow, he would have to find a job. An 8-year-old boy now had to earn money, for his father's treatment and for the family's survival. It was frightening, but at the same time, strangely liberating. At last, he was no longer just a bystander. Finally, he could do something, not just watch his father struggle with mysterious problems. His heart was heavy, but his resolve grew stronger with each step. Childhood had ended today, in hospital room number 7. And Santiago didn't regret it, he no longer had time to be a child. The next morning, Santiago woke up earlier than usual. For the first time in his life, he didn't wait for Papa to wake him, now he had to set the plan for the day. The house was eerily quiet. There was no sound of the radio turning on, no smell of morning coffee. He quickly washed his face with cold water, ate a piece of leftover bread, and went to school. But focusing on his lessons was nearly impossible, his thoughts kept drifting back to his father lying in the hospital bed, and to the urgent need to find a job. Santiago, are you listening to me? Señora Carmen's voice interrupted his thoughts. I'm sorry, ma'am. I know things are hard for you right now, she said gently after class, but education is your path to a better life. Don't forget that. I won't, the boy promised. But right now, Papa needs help. After school, Santiago set out to explore the city in search of work. He walked through the main streets, where tourists and wealthy citizens crowded the sidewalks, past office buildings full of people in suits, hurrying somewhere. Everything here was clean, polished, elegant, but it felt distant, unfamiliar. Near a large shopping center, he saw a boy around 10 years old polishing people's shoes. He had a small wooden box with brushes, polish, and cloths. Hi. Santiago greeted him. How's business? Not bad, the boy replied without looking up from his work. Who are you? I'm Santiago. I want to learn how to shine shoes too. Can you show me? The boy, his name was Raul, looked Santiago up and down. You're small. And skinny. There's a lot of competition here. Not everyone makes it. How much can you earn? On a good day, 40, maybe 50 pesos. On a bad one, 10 or 15. Depends on the weather, people's mood, and luck. 40 pesos. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Raul explained where to buy the supplies, which polish worked best, how to approach customers. The most important thing is to be polite and not pushy, Raul said. If someone says no, walk away immediately. And watch their shoes, expensive shoes usually mean generous tips. The next day, Santiago spent the family's last savings on a wooden box, brushes, polish, and cloths. His heart pounded with nervousness and fear. What if it doesn't work? What if people chase him away? His first customer appeared around 10 in the morning, a middle-aged man in a nice suit. Will you shine my shoes, son? Of course, señor. Santiago tried to sound confident, though his hands were trembling. He opened his box, took out a brush, and got to work. His movements were hesitant, he used too much polish, but slowly he got into the rhythm. The shoes really did start to shine. Not bad for a first try, the man smiled and handed Santiago 5 pesos. Good luck to you, boy. 5 pesos. Santiago clenched the coin in his fist, it was his first earned money. He felt both pride and sadness. Papa always said honest work was the foundation of a worthy life. Now Santiago was beginning to understand that through his own experience. By the end of the day, he had shined shoes for 7 people and earned 28 pesos. Not as much as he had hoped, but it was a start. That evening, Santiago visited his father in the hospital. Diego was lying in the same position, the pain still kept him from turning over. How are you, son? How was school today? It was good, Papa. And I started working. Santiago told him about shining shoes and showed the money he had earned. His father listened with pain in his eyes. You shouldn't be working at your age. I have to, Papa. We're a team, remember? The following days settled into a routine, school in the morning, work in the afternoon, hospital visits in the evening. Santiago was learning fast. He memorized that office workers preferred quick service, tourists liked to chat, and wealthy women paid attention to quality. By the end of the week, he picked up another job. Don Manuel, the owner of the newspaper stand, offered Santiago a spot selling newspapers at the bus stop in the mornings before school. 5 pesos for every 10 newspapers you sell, Don Manuel said. But be careful, some buses leave quickly. Selling newspapers turned out to be harder than shining shoes. He had to run between buses, give correct change, remember the prices. But little by little, he got the hang of it too. Newspapers. Fresh news, shouted Santiago, waving the papers in the air. Fresh news. In 2 weeks, he had learned yet another trade, washing cars. On weekends, he came to Don Carlos's car wash, where for a small fee he was allowed to clean customers' vehicles. The work was hard, hauling buckets of water, scrubbing car bodies, but the pay was decent. Gradually, Santiago became a familiar face in his neighborhood. Regular customers remembered his name, sometimes asked about school. One person especially fond of him was Señora Rosario, an elderly lady who brought him her elegant shoes every Wednesday. How's school, my boy? She asked, watching him work. Good, Señora Rosario. I'm getting mostly A's and B's. Well done. Education is a treasure no one can ever take away from you. But there were hard days too. Sometimes customers refused to pay the promised amount. Sometimes the police chased the boys off the main streets. One day, a group of teenagers tried to steal Santiago's earnings, but he managed to outrun them. By the end of the month, Santiago was making an average of 30 to 40 pesos a day. It was enough to cover the bare essentials, food, utilities, and medicine for his father. But they were still far from affording full treatment. The hardest part, however, was balancing work with school. Santiago often fell asleep over his textbooks, arrived late to class, and got scolded by teachers. But he kept going, he remembered his father's words about education. His father was slowly recovering. Doctors allowed him to stand for a few minutes each day, though returning to heavy labor was out of the question. I'll be discharged soon, Diego said one evening. At least I'll be able to help around the house. Maybe I'll find some light work. You will, Papa. You definitely will. Santiago didn't tell his father that he had seen the same black cars appear near their house at night. He didn't mention the strange looks from neighbors, part pity, part fear. The boy understood, their problems were far from over. But he also knew he was ready to fight. With honest work, just like his father had taught him. Every peso he earned was a small victory over circumstance. In the evenings, counting the day's earnings, Santiago thought about the future. About the day his father would fully recover. About the day they would finally pay off their debts. About the day he could once again be just a schoolboy. That dream gave him strength to wake up at dawn and set out once more in search of customers. Childhood was slipping away with each passing day, but in its place came something else, a sense of responsibility, pride in his own work, and the realization that he was capable of far more than he had ever believed. Santiago was walking home in a good mood. It had been a successful day. He had cleaned the shoes of 12 clients and earned 60 pesos, more than usual. Coins jingled in his pocket, and the boy was already planning to buy pain medicine for his father and maybe something tasty for dinner. His father had been discharged from the hospital 3 days ago. Diego still couldn't walk properly, his back hurt, and he moved slowly, leaning against the wall. But the doctor said in a couple of weeks, he might be able to find some light work. Life was slowly getting back on track. As Santiago turned onto his street, he immediately grew tense. Parked in front of their house was a black car, old but expensive, with tinted windows. Cars like that rarely showed up in their neighborhood, and when they did, it was never a good sign. The boy quickened his pace. Then he heard shouting. His father's voice, frightened, pleading. Harsh male voices. The sound of furniture crashing. Santiago bolted toward the house and flung the door open. What he saw made his blood run cold. 3 men stood around his father. Diego was lying on the floor near an overturned table, trying to shield his head with his hands. One of the men, tall, with gold teeth and a scar on his cheek, was methodically kicking him in the back and ribs. "Papa!" Santiago screamed and rushed forward. A second man, stocky, wearing a leather jacket, intercepted the boy halfway and grabbed him tightly by the arms. "Quiet, kid," he hissed, clamping his hand over Santiago's mouth. "Watch and learn." The leader, the one with the gold teeth, paused and looked at the boy. His eyes held no pity, no humanity. Only cold indifference. "Ah, the son is home," he sneered. "Perfect. Santiago, right?" Santiago struggled to break free, but the man's grip was like iron. All he could do was watch as his father writhed in pain on the floor. "Let me introduce myself, boy. My name is Juan Ramirez. But everyone just calls me Ramirez. I run the local, let's say, organization. And your papa here, he owes us." Ramirez crouched beside Diego. "You haven't worked in 2 months, Moreno. 2 months without paying. Do you think we're a charity?" "I was in the hospital," Diego rasped. "Back injury. I couldn't work." "I don't care about your problems," Ramirez cut him off. "I care about money. The debt grows every day. Interest adds up." He stood and nodded to his men. The third thug, a young man with tattoos on his arms, walked over and punched Diego hard in the stomach. Diego doubled over, gasping for air. Santiago tried to scream, but the sound was muffled by the thug's hand. Tears streamed down his cheeks. "Now your son gets to watch you suffer," Ramirez said with sadistic pleasure. "Maybe that'll help you understand how serious this is." The beating continued for several more minutes. The men hit carefully, enough to inflict maximum pain, but not to cause permanent injury. Diego groaned, but he no longer cried out, he was saving his strength. Finally, Ramirez raised his hand, and his men stopped. "Listen carefully, Moreno," he said, leaning down toward Diego. "You have 1 week to come up with the money. At least half the debt. If you don't, we'll be back. And next time, your boy won't just be watching." He stood up and turned to Santiago. "And you, kid, remember this, if your daddy can't pay, the debt falls to you. You'll work for us. We always have use for quick little boys." Ramirez nodded to his man, who released Santiago. The boy fell to his knees and crawled to his father. 1 week, Moreno, the gang leader repeated. Don't make us come back. The thugs turned to leave. At the door, Ramirez glanced back over his shoulder. And don't even think about going to the police. We have plenty of friends there. And there's nothing to report, we just dropped by to visit an old friend. The door slammed shut. Outside, the car engine roared to life and drove off. Santiago clung to his father, who was barely breathing from the pain. Papa, are you okay? The boy sobbed. I'll be, all right, son, Diego whispered. Help me, up. Together they somehow made it to the bed. Diego lay down slowly, wincing with every movement. Papa, who were they? Why were they hurting you? For a long time, his father said nothing, staring at the ceiling. Then he sighed heavily. It's a long story, son. A very long and sad story. Tell me. I'm old enough. I can understand. Not now, son. Right now, I need to think. I need to figure out what to do next, how to find the money. How much do we owe them? A lot. More than we can earn. Santiago clenched his fists. I'll work more, Santiago said. I'll find more clients. We'll pay them. Son, his father's voice was full of despair, even if you worked day and night, it wouldn't be enough. And I can't work construction anymore. My back won't take it. The boy looked at his beaten father, and a fire of rage ignited inside him. These men had hurt the person he loved most in the world. They had made him suffer. And now they were threatening him too. I won't let them hurt you again, Santiago said quietly. No matter what happens, I'll protect you. Diego turned his head and looked at his son. In the boy's eyes, he saw the resolve of a grown man. Promise me, he whispered, that you won't do anything foolish. These men are dangerous. Very dangerous. I promise, Papa. But in his heart, Santiago had already made a decision. If honest work wasn't enough to protect his family, then he had to find other ways. In their neighborhood, many boys earned quick money. Maybe it was time to find out how. His father fell asleep from exhaustion, and Santiago sat beside him, counting and recounting their meager savings. 40 pesos earned today. Maybe 200 total. A drop in the ocean compared to what they needed. Night fell outside, but the boy didn't sleep. He thought about Ramirez's gold teeth. The cold, indifferent eyes of the men. The way they made him watch his father suffer. And with every passing minute, honest work began to feel like a naive idea. Santiago didn't sleep that night. He stayed beside his father, listening to every groan, every ragged breath. Diego tossed and turned from the pain, sometimes murmuring things in his sleep, names, numbers, fragments that made no sense. By morning, his father had gotten worse. Dark bruises bloomed where the men had kicked him, and his back, which had just begun to heal, was in so much pain again that he couldn't even sit up in bed. Papa, should we call a doctor? Santiago asked as he got ready for school. No money for a doctor, son, his father whispered. We have to save, for them. Papa, the boy sat on the edge of the bed, tell me, finally, what is this debt? Who do we owe? And why? Diego turned toward the wall. This isn't your concern, son. Grown-up problems. I'm not a child anymore. Santiago burst out. I work, I earn money, I was almost beaten up yesterday. I have the right to know the truth. No, his father said firmly. Some things are better left unknown. You need to study, work honestly, and build your future. This filth shouldn't touch you. But it already does. Santiago felt despair boiling in his chest. They said if you don't pay, the debt will fall on me. At those words, Diego turned toward his son with great effort. His eyes filled with horror. No. That won't happen. I'll find a way. What way, Papa? The boy nearly shouted. You can barely get out of bed. And I make in a day what we need for a whole week. I'll find a job. Anything. Night guard, janitor. For how much? 20 pesos a day. With our debt, we'll be paying for 100 years. Diego closed his eyes. He knew his son was right, but he couldn't bring himself to tell the truth. How could he explain to an 8-year-old about the woman who left them for another man? About the loan she took out behind his back? About how Santiago's own mother had thrown them into this nightmare? Just, give me time to think, he whispered. At school, Santiago couldn't focus. The numbers in the math textbook reminded him of the debt, of the days ticking away before the gang returned. He solved problems mechanically, while his mind calculated. If he worked 14 hours a day, if he found more clients, if he raised prices. But no matter how he worked it out, the answer was the same: there was no way to earn that much money in a week through honest labor. Santiago. Señora Carmen's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. You're drifting off again. What's going on? Sorry, ma'am. Just a little tired. The teacher looked at him carefully. You're pale. And thinner. How are things at home? Everything's fine, the boy lied. After school, Santiago went off to work, but his heart wasn't in it. His hands trembled, his thoughts were scattered. By the end of the day, he had only made 15 pesos, customers could sense his nervousness and chose other boys. On the way home, he ran into Pedrito, the neighbor boy who always wore new sneakers and always had money for candy. Hey, Santiago. Pedrito greeted him cheerfully. How's it going? Fine, Santiago muttered. Heard you had visitors yesterday, Pedrito said in a lowered voice. Serious guys. Black car. Santiago stopped abruptly. How do you know? Come on, the whole street saw. Around here, everyone knows everything. Pedrito paused, then added, listen, if you need money, there are faster ways to earn it. What ways? Pedrito looked around to make sure no one was listening. Well, you don't have to shine shoes for pennies. Downtown's full of rich people who won't even notice if something goes missing. You mean stealing? Santiago stepped back. Not stealing, justice, Pedrito said coolly. They have too much, we have too little. He pulled a crumpled 100 peso note from his pocket. See this? Took me 1 hour to make what you earn in 2 days. Santiago stared at the money, feeling two voices battling inside him. One, his father's voice, spoke of honesty, dignity, and how stealing never solved anything. The other, the voice of desperation, whispered that sometimes, honesty is a luxury you can't afford. I can't, he said at last. My father taught me to work honestly. Your father taught you to be poor, Pedrito snapped. Look where it got you. If you change your mind, come find me. Me and the guys are hitting the center tomorrow. We'll show you how it's done. At home, Diego lay in the same position. He'd barely eaten, only sipping water, groaning from the pain. How are you feeling? Santiago asked. Bad, son. Really bad. Diego tried to shift and groaned. How about you? Did you make much? 20 pesos, the boy admitted. Silence fell between them. They both knew, it was catastrophically little. Papa, Santiago gathered his courage, tell me something. How much do we owe? To whom? Maybe there's some way to negotiate. You don't negotiate with them, Diego said darkly. They don't know what pity means. To them, either you pay. Or what? Or you pay with your life. Or the life of someone you love. Those words hung in the air like a sentence. Santiago felt the blood drain from his face. Then at least tell me how much. Maybe I can figure something out. Diego was silent for a long time, then finally said quietly. 8,000 pesos. Plus interest. The debt grows every month. Santiago felt dizzy. 8,000. That was more than he could earn in half a year. And with interest, it meant the debt would grow faster than they could ever pay it down. But, where did that kind of money come from? He whispered. Don't ask, son. Please. Just give me a little more time. I'll figure something out. That night, Santiago didn't sleep again. He lay awake, thinking about Pedrito's words, the crumpled 100 peso bill, the idea that in just 1 hour, he could make what took him several days. 8,000 pesos. With honest work, it would take over a year. And they had just 1 week. He remembered Ramirez's face, the gold teeth, the indifferent eyes. He remembered his father writhing on the floor in pain. He imagined what would happen if they didn't pay. And the voice of desperation grew louder, drowning out the voice of conscience. By morning, Santiago had made a decision. Maybe his father had taught him to be honest, but his father didn't know what it felt like, to watch the person you love most get beaten. Didn't know what it was like to realize that your honesty might cost that person their life. Sometimes, you have to choose between principles and love. And Santiago had made his choice. He woke with a heavy feeling in his chest. Today, he would do something his father had always described as the greatest sin. But there was no choice anymore. After breakfast, a piece of stale bread and a glass of water, he checked on his father. Diego was sleeping restlessly, wincing even in his dreams. On the nightstand lay an empty box of painkillers, the last they could afford. I'm sorry, Papa, Santiago whispered. But I have to do this. At school, he sat through only 2 lessons, then told Señora Carmen he wasn't feeling well and asked to go home. The teacher looked at his pale face with concern and let him go without asking questions. But instead of going home, Santiago went to look for Pedrito. He found him near the old soccer field, playing with a group of older boys. All of them were dressed better than most kids in the neighborhood, new sneakers, trendy shirts, expensive watches on their wrists. Hey, Santiago. Pedrito greeted him happily. Changed your mind? Yes, the boy said softly. But I don't know how to do anything. You have to teach me. Pedrito introduced him to the others. The leader was Marco, a 14-year-old with sharp eyes and quick hands. He looked Santiago up and down. You're small. And you look too honest. The marks will spot you as a newbie right away. But I learn fast, Santiago insisted. And I really need the money. Why? Asked Carlos, a 12-year-old boy with a cunning look. Santiago told them about his father, the debt, and the threats from the gang. He spoke carefully, avoiding too much detail, but the boys understood, it was serious. Got it, Marco nodded. Ramirez doesn't joke around. If he said a week, you've got a week. He paused, thinking. All right. We'll take you. But here's the deal, for the first month, you get 30% of what you make. We teach you, cover you, show you the best spots. Deal? 30%. That meant giving away 70% of anything he earned. But Santiago had no choice. Deal. Then listen up, Marco said seriously. Rule 1, never steal in your own neighborhood. People here know us, our families live here. Rule 2, never target the poor. They're like us. Rule 3, if you get caught, don't rat anyone out. Better to get roughed up than to lose your friends. Carlos added. And always watch the pockets. Front pocket, coins. Back pocket, wallet. Inside jacket, big bills and ID. Bags are a gamble, but usually hold the most stuff. They headed to the city center. On the way, Marco explained the finer points of the trade. The key is to look natural. You're not a thief, just a kid who happens to be nearby. The crowd is your friend. In a tight space, no one notices a missing wallet. Buses and markets, best places to work. Their first target was a heavy-set man in an expensive suit, standing at a bus stop reading a newspaper. A thick wallet stuck out from his back pocket. "Watch and learn," Marco whispered. He walked up to the man casually, stumbled a little, apologized, adjusted his shoulder bag, and just like that, the wallet slipped into his hand. It took less than 3 seconds. "Now your turn," Marco said once they had retreated to a safe distance. Santiago's heart pounded so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. His target, a young woman with an open handbag, a wallet sticking out of the top. I can't," he whispered. "You can," Marco said firmly. "Think about what'll happen to your father if you don't bring back the money." Santiago closed his eyes. He saw his father beaten, remembered Ramirez's gold teeth, the threats. When he opened them again, the determination was back. He walked up to the woman, pretending to look at the shop window next to her. As the bus pulled up and people started crowding, Santiago carefully reached for the bag. Suddenly, the woman spun around. "Boy, what are you doing?" Santiago froze like a rabbit before a snake. The wallet was already in his hand, and she had seen everything. I was just. "Thief," the woman screamed. "Thief! Somebody stop him." People turned. Someone lunged to grab Santiago, but he ducked and ran. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst from his chest. His legs shook with fear. He made it to the meeting spot where the boys were waiting. "You blew it?" Marco asked, seeing Santiago's pale face. "Yeah. She caught me. Happens. First time's rough for everyone. What matters is you didn't get caught." Marco clapped him on the shoulder. "You going to try again?" Santiago wanted to say no, wanted to run home and forget this nightmare. But then he remembered Ramirez's words. "If your old man can't pay, the debt passes to you." "I'll try." The second attempt went better. The target, an elderly man sleeping on the bus. His wallet was in his shirt pocket, sticking halfway out. Santiago sat next to him, waited for the bus to lurch at a stop, and in that brief jolt, slipped the wallet out. The man never stirred. "Brilliant," Carlos said when they got off the bus. "You're a natural." There were 200 pesos in the wallet, more than Santiago usually earned in 3 days of honest work. His cut, 60 pesos. "See?" Marco smirked. "And that's just the beginning. Once you get good, you'll be making 300-400 pesos a day." By the end of the day, Santiago had stolen 2 more wallets and some loose items from handbags. The total haul was 600 pesos. His share, 180. 180 pesos. In a single day. More than he sometimes earned in a whole week cleaning shoes. "You catch on fast," Marco said approvingly. "Tomorrow we're hitting the market. That place is a goldmine for guys like us." On the way home, Santiago felt strange. On one hand, there was pride, he'd proven capable, resourceful. On the other, burning shame. His father had spent a lifetime teaching him to be honest, and Santiago had betrayed all those values in just one day. But when he saw his father, pale, writhing in pain, barely able to move, all doubt vanished. "Papa, I brought medicine," Santiago said, pulling a pack of painkillers from his bag. "And something for dinner too." Diego looked at him in surprise. "Where did you get that kind of money?" "It's a weekday, there aren't many clients." "Got lucky," Santiago lied. "A rich gentleman gave me a big tip." His father took the pill and, for the first time in days, was able to eat properly. Santiago had bought meat, vegetables, even some fruit. "Thank you, son," Diego whispered as the pain started to fade. "You're a real man. Taking care of your family." The word stabbed Santiago right in the heart. If only his father knew how that money had been earned. That night, Santiago lay awake thinking about the day. How easy it had been to cross that line. How fast money came when you ignored your conscience. He also thought about the other boys, Marco, Carlos, Pedrito. They had accepted him into their crew, taught him the trade, shared their secrets. For the first time, he had friends who truly understood his struggles. Tomorrow, he'd go with them again. And the next day. Until he had enough money for Ramirez. His father slept peacefully, no groaning, no tossing for the first time in days. The medicine had worked. The pain had retreated. For this, it was worth it, Santiago thought. And finally, he too fell asleep. The next 2 weeks became the most contradictory period of Santiago's life. On one hand, there was money, real money. Enough for more than just bread. Enough for his father's medication, meat for dinner, even small joys like fruit. But each morning, he woke with a weight in his chest, knowing he would have to go out and steal again. "Son, where are you getting all this money?" Diego asked, confused, as Santiago brought home another batch of painkillers. "Yesterday you brought meat, today pills. That's more than you'd make in a week cleaning shoes." "Got lucky with the clients, Papa," the boy replied, avoiding his father's eyes. "Rich tourists give good tips." Diego wanted to believe his son, but something about Santiago's behavior raised concern. He had become more withdrawn, often lost in thought, and spent long nights unable to fall asleep. Meanwhile, Santiago's bond with Marco, Pedrito, and Carlos grew stronger. For the first time in his life, he had real friends, boys who understood his problems, shared their secrets, and accepted him into their circle. "You're learning fast," Marco said approvingly after a particularly successful day. "In a month, you'll be working on your own. And then you can start bringing in newbies," added Carlos. "You get paid well for training them." Pedrito showed Santiago new parts of the city where they could work. "See over there, by the bank? There's always a line. In a crowd, nobody notices anything. And here, near the bus station, people are in a rush, they don't pay attention to their pockets." In 2 weeks, Santiago had stolen over 12 wallets, several phones, and countless small items from bags. His cut was nearly 400 pesos, more than he'd earn in a month of honest work. They often worked the central square, where a fair was held. Lots of people, constant motion, perfect conditions for pickpockets. One day, Santiago noticed an elderly woman with an open purse and a thick wallet sticking out. He casually approached, pretending to examine goods at a nearby stall, and deftly reached toward the bag. "What are you doing, boy?" The woman suddenly grabbed his hand. Santiago froze. The wallet was between his fingers, but the woman had seen everything. I was just," he stammered, trying to come up with an excuse. "Thief," the woman shouted. "Catch the thief." Passers-by turned their heads. A tall man in a suit stepped closer. "What's going on?" "This boy tried to steal my wallet," the woman exclaimed. "We need to call the police." "Of course," the man nodded. "Let's find a patrol." "Wait," a young woman with a kind face stepped in. "Maybe we shouldn't call the police right away. He's just a child." "A child thief," the victim snapped, unwilling to relent. "Boy," the kind woman said gently, turning to Santiago, "why did you do it? Why do you need someone else's money?" Santiago looked at her, and suddenly couldn't hold back anymore. Tears poured from his eyes. "My papa is sick. He needs medicine. And I can't earn enough money to pay for it." "What's your father's name?" What happened to him? Through his sobs, Santiago told her about his father's injury, the treatment he needed, and the debts hanging over their family. The woman listened, and her expression grew softer with each word. "How much do you need for the medicine?" she asked. 100 pesos, the boy answered honestly. The woman opened her wallet and pulled out a bill. "Here. Take it. And don't steal again, okay? Stealing never solves anything." Then she turned to the man in the suit. "Please, don't call the police. He's learned his lesson." The man reluctantly nodded, and the crowd of onlookers slowly dispersed. Santiago was left alone, with the money in his hand and shame weighing heavily in his chest. "Thank you, Señora," he whispered. "I promise, I won't steal again." "I believe you, boy. Take care of your papa." But the next day, Santiago met up with the boys again. "Where were you yesterday?" Marco asked. "We waited at the meeting spot." "I almost got caught," Santiago admitted. "One woman stood up for me." "Happens," Carlos shrugged. "Just don't get caught twice." "So, are we working today?" And Santiago went with them. The promise he'd made to the kind woman dissolved in the face of harsh reality. Ramirez would be coming soon, and honest work couldn't earn that kind of money in time. For another week, everything went smoothly. Santiago had saved up almost the full amount needed for the monthly payment to the gang. Tomorrow, he planned to bring the money to his father and say that he'd got lucky with rich clients. But suddenly, everything turned against him. At the same central square, Santiago spotted a middle-aged man standing in line at the bank. A wallet was sticking out of the man's back jeans pocket. The boy approached from behind, pretending to trip, and at the moment of his fall, he snatched the wallet. "Stop!" The man's hand clamped down on Santiago's wrist like a vice. "Got you, little thief." The wallet was in the boy's hand. There was no use denying it. "Police!" the man shouted. "Someone call the police." Santiago panicked, looking around desperately for Marco and the others. They were nearby and had seen everything. "Marco!" Santiago cried. "Help me!" But his friends exchanged glances and quickly melted into the crowd. The first rule of their brotherhood: every man for himself if you get caught. "Marco! Pedrito!" Santiago shouted again, but they were already gone. 10 minutes later, a police patrol arrived. 2 officers, Senior Sergeant Mendez and a young constable. "What's going on here?" the sergeant asked. "Caught a thief red-handed," the man explained, still holding Santiago tightly. "He stole my wallet." "I see. What's your name, kid?" "Santiago Moreno," the boy whispered. "How old are you?" 8. The officers exchanged a look. An 8-year-old thief, not a pleasant sight. "Where are your parents?" "My dad's at home. He's sick." "All right, let's go see your father," the sergeant decided. They put Santiago in the police car. The boy silently prayed to every saint he could think of, hoping his father would somehow never find out what had happened. "Please," he begged the officers, "do whatever you want to me, just don't tell my dad." "Don't worry, kid," the young constable reassured him. "We just need to talk to him." The shack in the slums greeted them with the smell of poverty and despair. Diego lay in bed, unable to get up. His back was especially painful that day. "What happened?" he asked, alarmed, when he saw his son flanked by police officers. "Your son's been caught pickpocketing," explained Sergeant Mendez, glancing around the shabby room. "We caught him red-handed." Diego's face turned chalk-white. Is that true, Santiago?" The boy couldn't meet his father's eyes. "Yes, Papa. I'm sorry." "But why? Why would you steal?" "We needed money, for your medicine." Sergeant Mendez listened carefully to the family's story, about the injury, about the 8-year-old trying to earn money for his father's treatment. I see, he nodded. It's a tough situation. But the law is the law. What will happen to the boy? Diego whispered. Officially, he'd be taken to the juvenile division, then appear in court. But, the sergeant looked at the sick father and the terrified child, we can settle it here. How? For a case like this, the usual fine is 500 pesos. If you pay, we'll forget the incident. Diego didn't have that kind of money, but he understood the alternative was far worse. Santiago, Diego said quietly, give them all the money you stole. But Papa. All of it, son. Every last peso. Santiago pulled out his hidden stash, nearly 400 pesos. He handed every bill to the officers. The sergeant counted the money and nodded. That'll do. But listen, boy, next time, you won't get off this easy. Once the police had left, a heavy silence settled over the house. Diego wept openly, not trying to hide his tears. This is my fault, he kept repeating. I drove my child to stealing. Don't cry, Papa, Santiago said, approaching the bed. I won't do it again. Promise me, son, Diego took his hands. Promise you'll never steal again. Stealing doesn't solve problems, it only creates new ones. Better to die with honor than live in shame. I promise, Papa. I promise. And this time, Santiago kept that promise. The lesson had been too painful to forget. A week passed since that terrible day when Santiago was caught. A week that changed their lives, not for the better, but not entirely for the worse either. Ramirez came at the agreed time. When he saw there was no money, he beat Diego again, not as brutally as the first time, but enough to remind them of the gravity of their situation. He gave them another month's extension but warned, this was the last chance. Next time, he said before leaving, the boy starts working for us. We've got jobs for clever kids like him. After he left, father and son quietly cleaned up the broken furniture. They didn't speak of stealing again, the topic was too painful. Diego didn't share the truth about Santiago's mother as he had once promised, and Santiago didn't ask. It was as if they both knew, it wasn't time for explanations. It was time for action. Diego recovered quickly. His back still ached, but he could now stand, walk, even do light work. Through acquaintances, he found a job as a night watchman at a small office, 20 pesos a day, but it was something. Santiago went back to shining shoes. After the shame he'd endured, stealing was no longer an option. Every time he saw someone's wallet, he remembered his father's face that awful day. Better an honest 15 pesos than a stolen 50. Marco, Pedrito, and Carlos never approached him again. In fact, when they saw him in the street, they acted as if they didn't know him. Santiago understood, to them, he had become a burden, a weak link. Thieves don't forgive those who get caught. School wasn't going well either. Santiago had missed too many lessons and was falling behind. Señora Carmen tried to help, but it was hard for him to focus, his mind constantly returned to the debt, Ramirez's threats, and his father, who winced in pain every morning. On the evening of November 15th, Santiago was shining shoes near the Plaza del Sol shopping center. It was a good spot, plenty of wealthy clients, but the competition was fierce. 6 shoeshiners fought for every passerby. It had been a successful day. Santiago had already earned 70 pesos, a record for the past few weeks. In his makeshift piggy bank, a tin can with a slit cut into the top, lay the week's earnings. 280 pesos. Not much compared to the 8,000 peso debt, but every coin was honestly earned. The sun was setting, and Santiago was about to pack up when a man in an expensive suit approached him. "Boy, will you shine my shoes?" "Of course, señor." A woman in an elegant dress with gold jewelry followed behind him, and by her side walked a boy around Santiago's age, dressed like a little prince, designer jeans, brand-name sneakers, a golden watch on his wrist. Santiago knelt and began polishing the man's shoes. The leather was expensive, Italian craftsmanship, worth more than his family spent on food in a month. "Careful," the man snapped. "These aren't work boots, they're exclusive shoes." "Sorry, senor. I'll be very careful." "Ricardo, don't scold the child," the woman said gently. "He's trying his best." "Ricardo." Santiago flinched. That name sounded familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had heard it before. He finished the job and proudly showed the result. "All done, senor." The man, Ricardo, inspected his shoes critically. Then he frowned. "What's this?" He pointed to a tiny smudge on the toe of his shoe. "Can't you do anything right?" "Senor, it's just a small." "Small?" Ricardo's voice was rising. "I'm paying you, and this is the quality I get." "You're useless." People began to turn and look. The woman tried to calm him. "Ricky, don't make a scene. The shoes are fine." "Quiet, Isabel." Ricardo barked. "This ragged street rat ruined my shoes. And you're defending him?" Their son, a spoiled boy with an arrogant face, watched the scene unfold with amusement. He clearly enjoyed seeing his father humiliate the poor shoeshine boy. "You know what, kid," Ricardo continued, "do the job again. And for free, as compensation for your sloppy work." "But senor." "No buts. Either you do it again, or I complain to your parents about your irresponsibility." Santiago lowered his head and picked up the brush again. The smudge was so tiny it was barely visible, but there was no arguing with a rich client. Clients meant money, and money meant survival for his family. While he worked, listening to the mocking comments from Ricardo and his wife, "Look how stubborn he is, his parents must not teach him respect for adults," Santiago noticed something strange. Their son, the chubby, pampered boy, crept up to Santiago's box of tools and carefully picked up his coin bank. The very same tin can that held a week's worth of hard-earned money. "Hey!" Santiago cried. "What are you doing?" The boy smirked. "Nothing. Just looking at what you've got here." "Put it back." "That's my money." "What money?" the young Montenegro asked innocently. "I didn't take anything." But the can was clearly in his hands. Santiago lunged forward. "Give it back." "That's everything I have." "Miguel, what's going on?" the mother asked. "This street rat is accusing me of stealing," Miguel said, feigning outrage. "He says I took his dirty little money." "I'm not accusing." Santiago cried in desperation. "He really took it. Everyone saw." But the bystanders looked away, unwilling to get involved. And the Montenegro family closed ranks against the rude little beggar. "How dare you accuse my son of stealing?" Ricardo shouted. "We're wealthy people, we don't need your pathetic pesos." "But he did take it." Santiago's eyes filled with tears. "That money is for my sick father." "Enough of this drama." Ricardo snatched the coin bank from his son's hands and hurled it onto the pavement. The can burst open. Coins and bills scattered across the sidewalk. "Here's your money, beggar," he yelled. "Pick it up." Miguel began stomping on the money, laughing. "Oh, oops. Oops, again." His parents didn't stop him. In fact, they watched with cold detachment, almost as if it were a show for their amusement. Santiago crawled along the pavement, gathering the trampled money, while the Montenegro family stood over him, savoring the moment. Passers-by slowed their steps, glancing curiously at the scene, but no one intervened. Well-dressed people against a ragged shoeshine boy, the outcome of such a conflict seemed inevitable. "Papa, look how he crawls." Miguel giggled, continuing to kick the coins Santiago was trying to collect. "Like a dog." "Miguel, Don't be so cruel, Isabel said weakly, though there was no real reproach in her voice, only a tired condescension. Let him learn to respect his clients, Ricardo said coldly. Next time he'll do better work. One of the bills, a 20-peso note, had landed in a puddle from yesterday's rain. Santiago reached for it, but Miguel stomped on it first, grinding it deeper into the mud. Oops, sorry, the boy said mockingly. Didn't mean to. That's enough. Santiago shouted, rising to his feet. You saw what he did. Are you raising your voice at my son? Ricardo's eyes narrowed. He stole my money. He ruined everything. That was all we had. What money? Miguel said with exaggerated innocence. I didn't steal anything. Papa, he's accusing me again. Ricardo stepped closer, towering over Santiago. Listen to me, you little street rat. My son is a well-mannered boy from a good family. And you? You're nothing. A dirty beggar we were kind enough to let polish our shoes. And now you dare accuse him of theft. But I saw. You saw nothing. Ricardo barked. You're just an ungrateful liar trying to smear decent people. A few passers-by had now gathered, forming a small crowd. But no one stepped in to defend the boy. In fact, one adult shook his head disapprovingly. This is what kids are like these days. Accusing honest folks. Probably never taught to respect their elders, someone else muttered. Santiago looked around, searching for any sign of support, but all he met were indifferent or judgmental stares. To all these people, he was nothing more than a dirty beggar daring to raise his voice at a respectable family. You know what, Ricardo said, pulling a few coins from his pocket, I'm a generous man. Take this as compensation for the inconvenience. He tossed the coins on the ground, right next to the puddle. Pick them up. And be grateful I'm even paying for such lousy work. I'm not going to. Santiago began, but the words caught in his throat. You're not going to what? Ricardo asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Not going to take the money. Then walk away with nothing. Meanwhile, Miguel had found a new game. He grabbed one of Santiago's brushes and started dunking it in the puddle. Oh look. The brush wanted a bath too, he laughed. Miguel, don't ruin other people's things, his mother said automatically, though her tone was more amused than disapproving. They're not things, Mom. They're trash, Miguel replied, tossing the now filthy brush back into Santiago's box. Just like this beggar. Something inside Santiago broke. Not from pain, but from the sheer helplessness of it all. These people could do whatever they wanted to him, and no one would stop them. Because they had money, fine clothes, and the certainty that they were always right. Please, he whispered, dropping to his knees. Don't ruin my tools. Without them, I can't work. That's better, Ricardo said approvingly. Finally starting to understand who's in charge here. Isabel pulled out a mirror and reapplied her lipstick, as if none of this concerned her in the slightest. To her, it was just a minor delay before dinner at an upscale restaurant. Enough, Ricky, she said, putting the mirror away. We're going to be late for our reservation. You're right, Ricardo said. He turned to Santiago. Remember this lesson, kid. In life, there are two types of people, those who give orders, and those who follow them. And people like you better learn your place quickly. Miguel gave one final kick to Santiago's box, scattering the tools across the pavement. Goodbye, beggar. That was fun, he called out mockingly. The Montenegro family made their way to a luxury black SUV with tinted windows. The driver stepped out and respectfully opened the door. Santiago was left alone on the sidewalk, surrounded by his scattered tools and dirty money. The crowd of onlookers had dispersed, the show was over. The boy slowly began picking up his things. His brushes were soaked and filthy, the shoe polish spilled, his cloth soggy in the puddle. Some of the bills were so wet and torn they couldn't be used anymore. Out of the 280 pesos, only about 140 could be saved. The rest had turned into wet scraps of paper. "Hey, kid," someone called. Santiago looked up and saw a man in a security uniform. It was Osvaldo Herrera, the guard who worked at the electronics store across the street. "I saw everything," the guard said as he walked over. "Those rich folks are out of control." "It's okay," Santiago mumbled, wiping his nose. "I'm used to it." "You should never get used to that," Osvaldo said, shaking his head. "They made a spectacle of you, and you're still trying to justify it." He pulled a 10-peso coin from his pocket and handed it to the boy. "Here. It's not much, but it's something." "Thank you, senor." "That's very kind of you." "Kind," Osvaldo gave a bitter chuckle. "You know, kid, kindness in this world often looks like weakness. But justice, that's another thing entirely." "What do you mean?" "Nothing. Just thinking out loud." The guard paused, then asked, "What was the name of that guy? The one who humiliated you?" "Ricardo something. Montenegro, I think." "Ricardo Montenegro," Osvaldo repeated, writing it down in his notepad. "Got it. All right, head home now, kid. And remember, not everything in this life goes unpunished." Santiago gathered his belongings and slowly made his way home. The small clink of coins in his pocket was all that remained of a long, humiliating day. But it wasn't the lost money that weighed on his heart, it was the shame. The powerlessness. Worst of all, there was nothing he could do. Nothing at all. The rich were always right, simply because they were rich. And the poor were always wrong, simply because they were poor. At home, his father was waiting, with questions about how work went, and plans for the next day. But how could Santiago explain what had happened? How could he say that a week's worth of earnings had been destroyed in minutes? He walked through the dim streets of his neighborhood, unaware that a security camera had recorded every second of his humiliation. Unaware that the kind guard Osvaldo was already planning how to use that footage. Unaware that his encounter with the Montenegro family was only the beginning of a story that would change many lives. For now, he just walked home with a shattered heart, convinced that justice didn't exist in this world. Santiago got home after night had fully fallen. The pitiful clink of coins in his pocket echoed his mood, a storm of rage and humiliation churned inside him. He couldn't get Ricardo Montenegro's face out of his mind, the cold eyes, the sneering smile, the unshakable belief in his own superiority. Near the entrance of the building, he ran into Don Fernando, the neighbor from the apartment across the hall, who had been coming home drunk every night for days now. The old man could barely stay on his feet, and the stench of alcohol surrounded him like a fog. "Ah, Santiago." Don Fernando slurred cheerfully. "How's it going, boy? Making any money?" "Fine, Don Fernando," Santiago muttered, trying to walk past him. "Wait, wait," the old man grabbed him by the sleeve. "Don't rush. I've got something to tell you. I really need to get home." "No, listen." Don Fernando wobbled and leaned against the wall for balance. "You're a good boy, Santiago. Hard-working. Honest. Your father raised you right." "Thanks," Santiago said again, trying to move, but the old man wouldn't let go. "Your father, he's a saint, you know that." "A saint." Don Fernando's voice grew louder. "Anyone else would have given up long ago, but he's holding on. Holding on for you." "Don Fernando, you're drunk." "Drunk, yes," the old man agreed loudly. "That's why I speak the truth. And the truth is your father's a hero. Came up with a pretty little fairy tale about your mother, the whore, and even convinced himself it was real." Santiago froze. Had he heard that right? Or was it the alcohol talking? What did you say?" "Huh," the old man blinked, bleary-eyed. "What did I say?" About my mother. What did you say about my mother? Don Fernando suddenly seemed to sober up, realizing he'd said too much. Nothing, boy. I didn't say anything. Go on home. No. Santiago grabbed the old man's shirt. Say it again. What did you say about my mother? Leave me alone. I didn't say anything. You called her a whore, the boy shouted, his voice ringing off the apartment walls. You said she ran off with the first man she met. Don Fernando looked around in a panic. God forbid Diego overheard. Keep your voice down. You'll wake up the whole building. Tell me the truth. Santiago's eyes blazed. What do you know about my mother? I don't know anything, the old man tried to pull away. Just the ramblings of a drunk. You're lying. Santiago held firm. You know something. Tell me. Go ask your father. Don Fernando finally snapped, surrendering. Ask him. Leave me out of it. He tore himself free and hurried off to his apartment, leaving Santiago alone in the dark hallway. The boy stood frozen, trying to make sense of it all. A whore. Ran off with the first man she met. But, she was a doctor. She saved children in Africa. His father read him her letters. And then it hit him. The letters. The ones he saw his father writing that night. The same envelopes. The same handwriting. His heart pounded wildly. Could it be? Could the beautiful story of a heroic mother have been a lie all along? Santiago burst into the apartment like a storm. His father was sitting at the table, darning socks under the dim light of a desk lamp. Papa, the boy yelled. Is it true what Don Fernando said? Diego flinched, dropping the needle. What did Don Fernando say? What are you talking about? About Mom. He said she was a whore who ran off with the first man she met. Diego's face turned chalk white. He slowly rose from his chair. Son. Don Fernando was drunk. You shouldn't listen to drunken nonsense. Don't lie to me anymore. Santiago shouted. I know you wrote those letters. I saw you that night. What night? Diego whispered. The night you were writing a letter in one of those same envelopes, just like Mom's. And when I asked, you said it was for your friend Jose. Diego sank back into his chair as if his legs had been cut out from under him. The lie crumbled around him like a house of cards. Tell me the truth. Santiago demanded. My whole life was a lie. Mom isn't a doctor. She's not a hero. She abandoned us. Is that it? Silence. Long and heavy. The ticking of the old clock on the wall felt deafening. Is that it? Santiago repeated, his voice quieter now. Diego covered his face with his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled. Yes, son. Your mother left us. Almost right after you were born. Santiago's world shattered completely. Don Fernando had been telling the truth. All those years, he had looked up to a woman who didn't exist. A mother who had never loved him. Why? Santiago whispered. Why did you lie to me? Because I couldn't. Diego's tears streamed down his cheeks. I couldn't tell a 3-year-old boy that his mother had abandoned him. I couldn't explain to a 5-year-old why she never came to his birthdays. It was easier to invent a beautiful story. And the letters? I wrote them. All 8 years. Every year on your birthday. His father sobbed. I wanted you to have a mother to be proud of. So you wouldn't feel abandoned. Santiago stared at his father, feeling a cold emptiness growing inside. So there had never been any Africa. No children being saved. No heroic mission. Who is she really? He asked in an icy voice. Valentina. She was 18 when you were born. She worked as a shop assistant. Diego exhaled heavily. When she found out she was pregnant, she cried for weeks. Said it would ruin her life. And then what? When you were born, she wanted to give you up to an orphanage. Said we were too young, that once our lives improved, we could take you back. But I refused. You were my son. Santiago listened, the cold tightening around his chest. Valentina lasted 6 months. Then he appeared, a wealthy merchant. Married, but that didn't bother him. Promised her the life she always dreamed of. She thought she'd become his wife, live like a queen. Diego let out a bitter laugh. But he just used her as a mistress. And when he got bored, he tossed her aside. And she came back. She tried. Came back after a year, crying, begging for forgiveness. Said she realized her mistake and wanted to be a mother. Diego shook his head. But I couldn't forgive her. I couldn't forget how she left us, how you cried at night calling for her. And then? Then she left again. Said she'd find another way to rebuild her life. And she vanished. I haven't heard from her in 8 years. I don't know where she is or what became of her. And the debts? Diego's expression darkened. That's the worst part, son. I later found out that before she left, the second time, she secretly took out a loan from the bank. A big one, in her name. I didn't even know about it. But what does that have to do with you? We were married. The apartment is in both our names. Legally, I'm responsible for her debt, and the bank can seize our joint property. Diego sighed deeply. Valentina knew exactly what she was doing when she took that loan. Santiago felt rage rising inside him like a tidal wave. So his mother had deliberately set his father up, fully aware the debt would fall on him too. The loan was big. Really big. I only found out about it 6 months later, when the bank came knocking. By then, with the interest and penalties, the debt had grown by 50%. And the bank wanted the apartment? Yes. They said either I pay, or the place goes to auction. And I had a 1-year-old baby in my arms, no savings, and a construction job that paid peanuts. Diego covered his face with his hands. I had no choice but to go to the only people in town who could lend that kind of money fast. Ramirez. Ramirez. Diego nodded. I knew what I was getting into. I knew it was dangerous. But otherwise, we would have ended up on the street. Santiago stood frozen in the middle of the room, trying to absorb what he'd just heard. So all their suffering, the threats, the beatings, the fear, had started because of the woman he believed to be a hero. Not only had she abandoned them, but she'd chained them to a lifetime of debt. I'm sorry, son, Diego whispered. I thought I was doing the right thing. I just wanted to protect you from the pain. Protect me? Santiago laughed bitterly. You made me proud of someone who betrayed us. You made me love a ghost. I know it was wrong, but... No, the boy shouted. What's wrong is that because of her, we owe money to Ramirez. Because of her, I nearly became a thief. Because of her, they beat you. He grabbed one of the fake letters from the table and tore it to shreds. Let your hero burn in hell. Santiago. Diego tried to stop him, but the boy was already out the door. He ran through the dark streets, not caring where he was going. His mind was a whirlwind, Don Fernando's drunken words, his father's confession, and all the memories of when he'd proudly told his classmates about his mother the doctor. What a fool he'd been. So easy to believe a fairy tale. And now he understood why the older kids used to smirk, they knew the truth. They knew his mother wasn't a hero, but a runaway debtor. Santiago finally stopped on the bridge over the filthy stream that ran through their neighborhood. Below, the murky water reflected the dim glow of streetlights. His whole life had been built on lies. His mother, a lie. The letters, lies. Even the pride he'd once felt, a lie. Tears rolled down his cheeks, and he didn't wipe them away. Let them fall. He wasn't crying for the heroic mother he'd never had, he was crying for the illusions he had lost, and for the painful truth that the world was even crueler than he had feared. Santiago wandered the dark streets for over 3 hours. His anger slowly faded, replaced by exhaustion and a hollow emptiness. Where could he go? After the incident with the theft, he had no friends left. No relatives. No money for a hotel. By midnight, he realized, he had nowhere else to go. No matter how painful returning home might be, it was still the only place on earth where someone was waiting for him. He slowly made his way back, bracing himself for either awkward silence or another difficult conversation. But when he quietly opened the door, the scene inside made his heart ache. His father was sitting at the table, his head resting on his arms, quietly crying. In front of him lay the torn remains of the fake letters, the very ones Santiago had shredded in his fury before storming out. Diego was trying to tape them back together, as if clinging not only to the paper, but to his broken relationship with his son. "Papa?" Santiago said softly. Diego's head shot up. His face was wet with tears, his eyes red. "Santiago." He jumped to his feet. "You're back. I thought I'd lost you forever." "I had nowhere else to go," the boy answered honestly. "Not just because of that," Diego said, taking a step toward him, but stopping short of a hug, sensing it was too soon. "You came back because we're family. No matter what we're going through." Santiago looked at the torn letters on the table. "Why are you taping them back together?" "Because," Diego hesitated. "Because they were written with love. Not your mother's, mine. Every word in those letters, I wrote with love for you. I wanted you to have someone to admire. Someone to be proud of. But it was all a lie." "Yes, a lie," Diego admitted without excuse. "But sometimes lies are born not from the desire to deceive, but from the desire to protect. How could I explain to a 3-year-old that his mother abandoned him? How could I tell a 5-year-old that she stole money and ran away?" Santiago sat in silence, listening. "With each passing year, it became harder to tell you the truth. You were so proud of her, your heroic mother. You waited for her return so patiently. I couldn't bring myself to shatter that hope." "But you shattered it anyway," Santiago said, sitting on the bed, the weight in his chest growing heavier. "You just waited 8 years to do it." "I know," Diego nodded. "And that's my fault. My greatest mistake. I defended her all these years," Santiago said quietly. "Argued with classmates who laughed. Dreamed about meeting her someday." "I'm sorry, son," whispered Diego. "I also realized something," Santiago looked up at his father. "You've worked 3 jobs your whole life not because you didn't earn enough, but because half of your money went to the gang. Because of her debts. That's not important." "It is important." The boy cut him off. "You could have lived a much better life if it weren't for her. You could have found another woman, started a new family. But you stayed with me, with her debts, with her betrayal." Diego walked over and carefully sat next to his son. "Santiago, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. I never once regretted staying with you. Never once blamed you for our problems." "But I blamed you," the boy whispered. "When I found out about the lie, I thought you had tricked me. But you were just protecting me. Like you always have." Tears welled up again, not from anger this time, but from understanding. His father had sacrificed everything for him, his happiness, his chances, even his honesty, lying just to spare his son pain. "Papa," Santiago said softly. "I'm sorry for yelling at you. For calling you names. You didn't deserve that." "I did," Diego shook his head. "I lied to you. Even if it was out of love, it was still a lie. But you didn't want to hurt me. Wanting to or not, it doesn't matter. What matters is that I did hurt you. And now I need to make it right." They sat together in silence. Outside, the night city murmured, a dog barked somewhere in the distance, and the occasional car passed by. "Papa," Santiago finally said. "Let's make a promise. No more lies between us. No more secrets. If there's a problem, we talk about it. If it hurts, we get through it together. It's a deal, son. And one more thing," the boy paused, gathering his thoughts. "I don't want to call her Mom anymore. I only have one parent, you. She's just a woman who betrayed us." Diego hugged his son, for the first time that evening. And he felt the boy hold on tighter instead of pulling away. "You know what's strange?" Santiago said, burying his face into his father's shoulder. "I thought I'd hate her. But instead, I just feel empty. Like she died for me a long time ago, and I'm only now realizing it. That's normal, son. We can grieve not just for the dead, but for the living who became strangers to us." "And you? Do you hate her?" Diego thought for a moment. "No. I don't hate her anymore. I spent too much energy on that hate. Now she's just a part of the past. Painful, yes, but over. But the debts are still here. They are. And we'll pay them off. With honest work, just like we planned. It might take years, but we'll make it. We'll make it together," Santiago said firmly. "Together." They gathered the torn-up letters and threw them away. A symbolic and final act. Together, they cleared the remnants of the false story from the table and put the kettle on, deciding to share some tea and talk about tomorrow. "Papa," Santiago said as they sat with warm mugs in their hands, "now I know everything about you. And you know everything about me, even about the stealing. There are no more secrets between us. And that's a good thing," Diego smiled. "Secrets destroy families. But truth, even if it hurts, makes them stronger. Then let's tell each other everything. All of it. I'll tell you everything about the stealing, in detail. And you tell me about the debts, and what it was like raising a child on your own." And they talked until sunrise. For the first time in 8 years, completely honestly, without hiding anything, without trying to protect each other from pain. They spoke about fear, loneliness, and how hard it was to make the right choices. As the sky began to lighten, Santiago realized, they had no more secrets. But they had something far more valuable, complete trust, and the understanding that they were truly a team. Not just a father and son, but two people who had endured every hardship and stayed together. "Whatever happens next," he murmured, falling asleep on his father's shoulder, "we'll make it. Because we're honest with each other." "We'll make it, son," Diego replied, covering the boy with a blanket. "We absolutely will." Meanwhile, Osvaldo Herrera couldn't shake what he had seen 2 days ago. The scene of the little shoeshiner's humiliation kept replaying in his mind, haunting him. He'd worked as a security guard for 15 years and had seen plenty of injustice, but such blatant cruelty toward a child had ignited something inside him. That evening, back in his modest apartment, he took out a flash drive with the surveillance footage. The quality was clear, every detail was visible and audible. The arrogance of the wealthy, the boy's tears, the money trampled underfoot. "Dad, what are you watching?" asked his 12-year-old daughter Carla, peeking over his shoulder. "Work stuff, honey. Just reviewing some security footage." Carla looked at the screen and frowned. "Dad, why is that boy crying? What are those people doing to him?" Osvaldo didn't answer right away. His daughter was a smart girl, and he didn't want to lie to her. "Rich people hurting a poor kid," he finally said. "They stole his money and stepped all over it. That's not right." Carla exclaimed angrily. "They should be punished." "And how do you punish them? They're rich." They've got lawyers, connections. Then show the video to everyone. She said, her eyes lighting up. Post it online. Let people see who they really are. Osvaldo paused. The idea wasn't bad. These days, the internet was a powerful force, sometimes stronger than the police or the courts. But I don't know how to use those websites. I do. Carlo was already reaching for the keyboard. Give me the flash drive, I'll take care of it. An hour later, the video was uploaded to several popular platforms under the title, Wealthy Restaurant Owners Bully Poor Boy and Steal His Last Coins. Carla added a caption. This happened yesterday outside the shopping center. A rich family mocks an 8-year-old boy who's just trying to earn an honest living. Their son steals his coin jar for fun and stomps on the money. Is this justice? For the first few hours, the video gained views slowly. But by morning, something had changed. Santiago heard about the video the next day, while walking home after another unsuccessful work shift. Ever since the Montenegro family had ruined his tools, his earnings had dropped drastically. Hey, Santiago. Someone called. It was Don Carlos, a neighbor. You know you're famous now. What? Santiago blinked in confusion. There's a video of you online, millions of people are watching it. The one where those rich people humiliated you. The whole country knows about the Montenegros now. Don Carlos pulled out a battered smartphone and showed Santiago the screen. On it, Santiago saw himself, dirty, crying, crawling on the pavement for his scattered money. And above him stood the elegant Montenegro family, their faces cold and indifferent. Almost 2 million views in a day. Don Carlos said, impressed. And the comments? Thousands of them. Everyone's furious at those rich jerks. Santiago scrolled through the comments, eyes wide. This is disgusting. How can anyone treat a child like that? Poor kid, and that fat brat stomping on his money. Where are the parents? Why is a kid working alone on the street? Who are these people? They need to be held accountable. That's the Montenegro family. Owners of the Golden Heart restaurant chain. Never eating at their restaurants again. By evening, the video had reached 5 million views. By the next morning, 8 million. Social media exploded with outrage. People were sharing the video, adding their own commentary, telling stories of similar injustices. Someone even tracked down information about the Golden Heart restaurant chain and posted the addresses of all their locations. That's when the real movement began. Boycott Montenegro restaurants. No more money for those who humiliate children. Shut down this chain for good. By the end of the second day, the video had surpassed 10 million views. The hashtag Justice for Santiago was trending #1 across the country. Crowds started gathering outside Golden Heart restaurants holding signs like, "You don't hurt children." "Montenegro, shame of the nation." "Justice for the little shoe shiner." People refused to enter the restaurants. Even more, they stopped others from going in, holding up their phones and playing the now infamous video. Restaurant managers were calling Ricardo Montenegro in a panic. "Señor, it's a disaster. Not a single customer all day. People are protesting at the doors. This is madness." Ricardo shouted into the phone. All this over some little beggar. But the madness was becoming all too real. Orders had dropped by 90%. Suppliers began demanding payment up front, afraid to be associated with a toxic brand. Employees were quitting, unwilling to stay with a company branded as shameful. By the end of the week, Ricardo Montenegro finally understood, his empire was collapsing before his eyes. 20 years of building a business were unraveling because of one video. Meanwhile, Santiago sat at home, unsure of what to feel. On one hand, it was gratifying to see people supporting him, to see justice, at last, taking hold. On the other hand, it felt strange. The whole world had seen him at his lowest, crying, humiliated, powerless. "Son," his father said gently, "maybe this is a sign. Maybe life is giving us a second chance." Diego had seen the video too, read the comments. Many people were asking how they could help the boy and his family. "I don't know, Papa. It feels weird. I didn't want the whole world to see me crying. But the whole world also saw how strong you are. How hard you work, how much you try. And they saw who those rich people really are." The news about the scandal was already being broadcast on television. Journalists were digging for more information about the Montenegro family, the boy from the viral video, and how such a thing could happen in a so-called civilized society. But the most important thing was happening in people's hearts. The video struck a deep chord, a weariness with injustice, with the way the rich could humiliate the poor and get away with it. At last, people had found a way to say, enough. The internet gave a voice to those who never had one. And that voice rang out so loudly that the whole world heard it. Justice doesn't always come through courts or police. Sometimes it comes through phone screens and computer monitors, through the hearts of ordinary people who refuse to stay silent any longer. On the morning of the third day after the video was posted, a car from Channel 7 pulled up to their building. Santiago and Diego were having breakfast when someone knocked on the door. "Good morning," said a young woman in a business suit. "My name is Patricia Ramos, I'm a journalist. We'd like to speak with the boy from the viral video." Diego and Santiago exchanged a glance. The night before, they had agreed to be honest with each other, but that didn't mean sharing the whole truth with strangers. "What exactly do you want to talk about?" Diego asked cautiously. "About your family, the incident with the Montenegro family, and how you're living. People want to help, but they need to hear your story." Santiago looked to his father. Diego nodded. They did need help, and maybe this was their chance. "Come in," Diego said. Patricia entered with a cameraman and looked around. The apartment was modest, the furniture old, but everything was tidy and clean, exactly what they needed for a story about honest poverty. "Santiago, could you please tell us what happened that day at the shopping center?" the journalist asked gently as the camera started recording. The boy told the story simply and without exaggeration. How he was cleaning shoes, how the Montenegro family began to criticize him, how their son stole his coin bank and stomped on his money. "And why are you working? Where is your mother?" Patricia asked. Diego and Santiago exchanged another glance. They had already agreed on what to say. "My mom died when I was little," Santiago said softly. "My dad raises me alone. He has back problems from an injury on a construction site, so I help earn money." It wasn't a full lie. To them, Valentina was truly gone. "And how much do you earn?" Patricia asked. "Depends on the day," Santiago replied. "On a good day, maybe 60 pesos. On a bad one, 10 or 15. Patricia nodded, jotting notes. The story was perfect for television: a motherless boy, a sick father, honest work against wealthy abusers. "And what did you feel," she asked Diego, "when you saw your son crying in that video?" "Pain," he answered simply. "And shame, that I couldn't protect him. A parent should protect a child, not have the child earning for the family." "But Santiago is a very brave boy," the journalist added. "He works, studies, takes care of his family. That's what moves people." The report aired that same evening. The story of a little hero and his ailing father touched the hearts of millions. The station's phones wouldn't stop ringing, people wanted to know how they could help the family. The next day, journalists from 3 more TV channels came. Then reporters from newspapers and online outlets. Santiago's story spread across the entire country. But the real wave began when someone created a donation page titled, "Help Little Santiago and His Father." "Dad, look!" Santiago exclaimed, showing the screen of a neighbor's phone. They've already raised $2,000. By the end of the day, the number had reached 5,000. By the end of the week, 20,000. The donations weren't just coming from their country. The video, subtitled in English and other languages, had gone global. People from the US, Europe, and Asia were donating to a family they had never met. From a family in Canada. Stay strong. Donation from teachers at a school in Germany. Santiago is an example for our students. From a group of doctors in Mexico. Wishing your dad a speedy recovery. Each donation came with words of encouragement. People shared their own stories, their experiences with poverty, and admiration for the boy's courage. I don't understand, Santiago said to his father. Why are strangers sending us money? Because there is kindness in people, son, Diego replied. And your story helped bring that kindness to the surface. You showed that honesty and hard work still exist, even in the harshest conditions. A month later, the total reached an astonishing amount, $220,000. Father and son sat at home, staring at the number on the screen, hardly believing it. Dad, that's more than we could have earned in a lifetime, Santiago whispered. Much more, son, Diego nodded, eyes full of awe. So what now? Diego paused, deep in thought. That amount of money could solve all their problems. They could pay off Ramirez, buy a real home, treat his back properly, and give Santiago an education. You know, son, first thing, we'll pay off the debts. Completely. So those people never come near us again. And after that? Then we'll get my back surgery done the right way. In a proper clinic, with the best doctors. Is it expensive? Not compared to what we have now. And the rest of the money? We'll buy a real home. Not in the slums, somewhere safe, in a good neighborhood. You'll go to a good school. You'll finally be able to study without worrying about money. Santiago imagined that life, no fear of gangsters, no more polishing shoes after school, no more counting every coin. You know what's the most surprising thing? He said. I used to think justice didn't exist. But it does. It just comes from where you least expect it. What do you mean? I thought justice was when the police punished bad people. But it turns out, justice is when good people help those in need. Diego hugged his son. You've become very wise, son. Not wise. I just realized the world isn't as bad as I thought. Yeah, there are people like the Montenegros. But there are also thousands of others who helped a kid they didn't even know. That evening, they talked for hours about their plans. About which school to choose, which neighborhood to live in, and how to use the money wisely. Just one condition, said Santiago. We have to help someone else. Maybe kids who work on the streets, or families struggling with debt. Why? Because people helped us when we needed it most. Now it's our turn to help others. Diego looked at his son with pride. The money hadn't changed the boy, it had only revealed the kindness in his heart. The next day, they headed to the bank to officially access the donations. On the way, Santiago suddenly stopped. Dad, what if this is all a dream? Santiago asked. What if I wake up and we're poor again, and Ramirez comes knocking? Then we'll deal with it, Diego smiled. We're a team, remember? A team, Santiago nodded and kept walking. But it wasn't a dream. Justice truly did exist. Sometimes it came through phone screens and computer monitors, through the hearts of strangers who couldn't turn away from someone else's pain. The first thing they decided to do was close the darkest chapter of their lives, pay off Ramirez once and for all. Diego called him and asked for a meeting. His voice was calm and steady, nothing like it had been before. Want another extension? Ramirez sneered. Or is your kid going to try stealing again? No, Diego replied. I'm here to pay. In full. A long pause. Come to my office tomorrow. And bring the boy. I'd love to see this new confidence for myself. The next day, father and son made their way to Ramirez's office, a small building in an industrial district that served as a front for his shady dealings. Santiago was nervous. Their last encounter had left a deep scar. But now everything was different. They had money, and with it, power. Ramirez greeted them with his usual smirk. "So, how are our internet stars doing? I hear the whole world feels sorry for you now." "We're here to settle the debt," Diego said, placing a thick envelope on the table. "How much is in there?" "The full amount. With interest." Ramirez slowly counted the money. His face flickered between surprise and disappointment. "Where'd you get this kind of money?" "People helped us," Santiago said simply. "I see." Ramirez locked the money in a safe. "Well then. Debt's paid. You won't hear from us again." "And the receipt," Diego added firmly. "What receipt?" "A written statement confirming the debt is paid in full. So there are no surprises later." Ramirez frowned but scribbled a short receipt. He understood, this family was now in the public eye. Any trouble involving them would quickly become national news. As they walked out of the office, Santiago felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The years of fear were finally over. No more threats, no more beatings, no more pressure to find money by any means. "We're free," Diego whispered. "Finally free," Santiago echoed. Their next step was surgery for Diego, this time in the best private clinic in the city, with Professor Mendez, a renowned spinal specialist. "You have a serious issue," the professor said after the examination. "But it's treatable. The surgery is routine, and recovery will take about a month. After that, you'll forget the pain ever existed." The operation went well. Santiago sat in the hallway, waiting anxiously for his father to wake up from anesthesia. Everything here was different: clean walls, kind staff, modern equipment. Nothing like San Miguel Hospital, where they couldn't even afford painkillers. "Dad, how are you?" the boy asked as Diego opened his eyes. "Strange," his father smiled weakly. "For the first time in years, my back doesn't hurt. Professor said you'll be able to run in a month." "Run?" Diego shifted a little and blinked in surprise. "I already feel 20 years younger." While Diego was recovering, they worked with a realtor to find a modest 2-story house in Las Rosas, a quiet, leafy neighborhood where teachers, doctors, and small business owners lived. The house was simple, but to them it felt like a palace. 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a bathroom with hot water, and a small garden in the yard. Most importantly, no drunk neighbors, no shady men in black cars. "Is this really ours?" Santiago asked on moving day, standing in his very own room. "It's real, son. Now you've got a space to study, to read, and to dream." Santiago opened the window and inhaled deeply. The air smelled different here, like flowers from the neighbors' gardens, not exhaust fumes and garbage. The hardest part turned out to be getting into a private school. Santiago had fallen far behind the curriculum, he'd spent too much time working instead of studying. "The boy is bright," said the principal of the elite San Patricio school after reviewing Santiago's records. "But there are serious gaps in his knowledge. He'll need extra tutoring." "We're willing to pay for private lessons," Diego replied. "It's not just about money," the principal continued. "Your son comes from a very different environment. The students here are children of doctors, lawyers, and business owners. They have different interests, different conversations. But he'll adapt quickly," Diego insisted. "Santiago is very capable." The principal agreed to admit Santiago on a probationary basis. His first day at the new school was a real shock. Spacious classrooms with modern equipment, a library with thousands of books, a gym, a swimming pool. And the other kids, dressed in expensive clothes, carrying the latest gadgets, chatting about holiday trips and weekend plans. "Are you the kid from the video?" asked a classmate named Andres during recess. "Yeah," Santiago replied, bracing himself for mockery. "That's awesome. You're famous now. My dad says you're brave, you didn't give up and worked honestly." To Santiago's surprise, most students treated him with curiosity and respect. His story had touched their families too. "What's it like working on the street?" asked his classmate Maria. "Is it true you can fix shoes?" Carlos chimed in. Santiago told them stories, carefully. He knew these kids had never faced real problems. To them, his life was an adventure, something exotic. They didn't know what it meant to count every peso or worry about having food the next day. But there were challenges. The academic program was far more advanced than at his previous school. Math, history, literature, he was behind in everything. He had to study with tutors every afternoon after school. "Don't give up, son," Diego encouraged him. "Remember when you were learning to shine shoes? It didn't come instantly either. But that was easier. Grab a brush and start cleaning. Now it's algebra, English, art history. But once you get through this, you'll be able to choose any future you want. Doctor, engineer, teacher, you'll choose a profession because you love it, not because you have no choice." 6 months later, everything had changed. Diego now worked as a project manager for a construction company, no more hauling cement sacks. His back no longer hurt, his spirits were high, and he had even started seeing someone, Clara, a kind nurse from the clinic. Santiago had caught up with his schoolwork and had become one of the top students in his class. He especially excelled in math and physics. "You know," he told his father one evening as they sat together in the garden behind their house, "I think I want to become a doctor." "Why a doctor?" Diego asked. "Because doctors help people. They heal, save lives. Like Professor Mendez, who fixed your back." Diego wrapped an arm around his son. "That's a beautiful goal, son. And I'm sure you'll be a great doctor. And I want to help poor children too. The ones who can't afford treatment. Like we couldn't before. So, you'll work in free clinics?" "Not just that. I want to create a foundation. I'll use part of my earnings to pay for medical care for children from low-income families." Diego looked up at the stars, shining brighter out here away from city smog. "You know, son," he said, "sometimes I wonder if all our hardships were meant to shape you into who you are. Kind, compassionate, ready to help others." "Maybe," Santiago agreed. The boy who used to shine shoes on the street would have never understood how important it is to help others. But this one does. They sat in silence, enjoying the peace. For the first time in years, they didn't have to worry about money for tomorrow, about debts, about simply surviving. 3 months had passed since they moved into their new home. Santiago had adapted to his private school, Diego had fully recovered from his surgery, and their new life finally felt stable. One Saturday morning, as Diego read the newspaper over breakfast, he suddenly turned pale. "What's wrong, Dad?" Santiago asked, noticing the look on his father's face. "Look at this," Diego said, showing him an article in the local news section. "Fire in San Jose District. Security guard's family left homeless." Santiago read the article and felt a tight knot form in his chest. Osvaldo Herrera, 43, security guard at an electronics store. Wife and 12-year-old daughter, Carla. The fire completely destroyed their apartment. The family lost all their belongings. The cause of the fire is under investigation, the report said. "Dad, that's the same guard. The one who recorded the video." "Yes, son." Osvaldo Herrera, Diego reread the article, frowning. Strange coincidence, isn't it? Just 3 months after the scandal, and his home burns down. Do you think it wasn't an accident? "I don't know," son, Diego replied. But people like Montenegro aren't known for forgiveness. Especially not toward those who stand in their way. He set the newspaper aside. If it weren't for Osvaldo, we'd still be living in fear and poverty. So it's our fault his house burned down? Santiago asked, horrified. Not our fault. It happened because of his kindness and courage. He could have walked away, like everyone else. But he chose justice. Then we absolutely have to help him, Santiago said firmly. If he suffered because he protected us, it's our responsibility. That's exactly what I think too, Diego nodded. They quickly got dressed and drove to the San Jose district. The scene was grim, charred walls, blackened windows, the bitter smell of smoke. Standing outside the ruins was the Herrera family, with just a few bags, all they had managed to save. Osvaldo recognized them instantly. Santiago. Diego. What are you doing here? We read about it in the paper, Diego said. We came to check on you. To see how we can help. We're fine, Osvaldo tried to smile, but Santiago noticed his trembling hands. The most important thing is that we're all alive. We'll rebuild the rest. Señor Osvaldo, Diego asked gently, was the fire definitely an accident? Osvaldo's face darkened. The firefighters say it was arson. Someone poured gasoline on the wall and set it alight. But there's no proof. No witnesses. Do you have any enemies? Diego pressed. What enemies would a security guard have? Osvaldo gave a bitter chuckle. Unless you count the ones who didn't like my video about your son. Father and son exchanged a knowing look. Their suspicions were confirmed. But Santiago also saw the fear in the man's shaking hands, and the way his daughter, Carla, clung to her mother, staring at the ruins of their home. Señor Osvaldo, the boy said, you helped us so much. Without your video, we never would have escaped poverty. Now it's our turn to help you. Boy, we can't accept your help. I just did what any decent person should have done. That's exactly why we want to help, Santiago insisted. Because you are a decent, honest man. Diego pulled an envelope from his pocket. Osvaldo, please don't say no. There's $50,000 in here. It's enough for a new apartment and everything you need to furnish it. The security guard stared at the envelope in disbelief. That's too much. I can't accept something like that. Yes, you can. And you must, Santiago said firmly. People from all over the world donated money to help us. But the very first help came from you. You gave us hope. Carla, Osvaldo's daughter, walked up to Santiago. Are you the boy from the video? The one the rich people were mean to? Yes. And now you're rich. We have money now. But being rich isn't just about money. Real wealth is being able to help the people who helped you. The girl nodded, as if she understood that wisdom better than many adults. Dad, she said, turning to Osvaldo, take the money. One day, we'll help someone else, too. Osvaldo stood in silence, looking at the envelope. Then he looked at his family, at the scorched remains of their home, and at the people who had come to help. Thank you, he said at last. We'll never forget this. And we'll never forget what you did for us, Diego replied. That same evening, they heard another piece of news. The TV was reporting on the bankruptcy of the Golden Heart restaurant chain. Ricardo Montenegro's company has announced the closure of all its restaurants, the news anchor said. In 6 months of nationwide boycotts, the chain lost over 90% of its customers. Losses are estimated in the millions. Footage showed shuttered restaurants with "For Sale" signs in the windows. Ricardo Montenegro appeared in an interview, looking older and worn out. I lost everything because of one video, he said. I spent 20 years building this business from one small restaurant, and it all collapsed in 6 months. 10 years later. The lecture hall at the National Medical University was packed. Today was the announcement of entrance exam results, the most competitive admissions process in the country. 15 applicants per seat. The best graduates from across the nation had fought for the chance to become doctors. Santiago Moreno, 98.7 out of 100. First place, announced the dean. Santiago felt his knees weaken. 10 years of intense study at a private school, endless tutoring hours, chemistry and biology Olympiads, all of it had led to this moment. Diego, sitting among the parents in the audience, couldn't hold back his tears. His son, the same boy who once shined shoes for pennies, had been accepted into medical school with the highest score in the country. "Congratulations, young man," said Professor Mendez, the same surgeon who had once operated on Diego. "I remember an 8-year-old boy telling me he would become a heart surgeon. Looks like he meant it." "More than meant it, Professor," Santiago replied with a confident smile. "Then welcome to the toughest profession in the world." University years passed in constant study. Santiago wasn't just one of the top students, he was the top. A GPA of 9.8 out of 10, winner of student science competitions, and author of 3 research papers by his 3rd year. "Moreno, you're a phenomenon," said the head of the anatomy department. "In 30 years of teaching, I've never seen a student like you. I just never forgot why I came here, Professor." "And why is that?" "So that no one dies just because they can't afford surgery." In his 4th year, Santiago founded a student-run clinic in a poor district of the city. Every weekend, he and a group of volunteers offered free medical care to those who couldn't afford private doctors. "Son," Diego often told him, "you're already a doctor. Not by diploma, by calling. I'm learning from the best teacher, Dad. You showed me what it means to sacrifice for others." But in his 5th year, just as Santiago was preparing for his final national exams, the thing he feared most happened. Diego came home from work and collapsed into a chair, clutching his chest. "Dad! What's wrong?" "My heart, sharp pain," he whispered, turning pale. Santiago immediately checked his pulse and blood pressure. Arrhythmia, tachycardia, all the signs pointed to a serious heart condition. "We're going to the hospital now," Santiago said firmly. "Son, I have an important meeting at work tomorrow." "To hell with work." Santiago raised his voice at his father for the first time in his life. "Your life is more important than any meeting." At the cardiology center, the diagnosis was confirmed: severe ischemic heart disease, multiple blockages in the coronary arteries. Years of hard labor, stress, and genetic predisposition, all the factors had come together. "He needs immediate surgery," the cardiologist said. "Coronary artery bypass grafting. Without it, 6 months, at best." "Do the surgery," Santiago said without hesitation. "When's the earliest you can operate?" 3 days from now." "But the cost?" "Money isn't an issue. Just save him." The surgery lasted 6 hours. Santiago sat in the hallway the entire time, reading medical journals on cardiac surgery. He wanted to understand every step of what was happening to his father. The operation was a success, the surgeon finally reported. But his heart is significantly weakened. He'll need constant care and strict medical supervision. Diego spent a month in the hospital. Santiago visited him every single day, sometimes sleeping in the chair beside his bed. "You should be studying, son, not sitting here with me," Diego said. "Dad, you took care of me my whole life. Now it's my turn to take care of you. But your exams. I'll pass. I promise. But first, you have to get better." Diego did recover, but the doctors were clear: no physical exertion, early retirement, and ongoing medical monitoring. "You know, son," he said when they returned home, "I'm actually glad this happened." "How can you be glad about being sick?" "Because I saw what kind of doctor you're going to be. You were already treating me before you had a diploma, not with medicine, but with love and care. Santiago passed his state exams with flying colors, once again, the top of his class. He was assigned to a prestigious hospital for his residency in cardiac surgery. 2 years of residency flew by. Santiago worked 16-hour days, assisted in the most complex operations, and studied the latest surgical techniques. Professors unanimously agreed he had a rare gift for surgery. "You have golden hands and nerves of steel," said the head of the department. "A rare combination." "The nerves were forged in childhood," Santiago replied. "And the hands? I guess I got them from my father. He worked with his hands his whole life too." Diego followed every step of his son's success and took pride in each achievement. His illness had receded, and the past 2 years had brought them closer than ever, not just father and son, but best friends. "You know," Diego said shortly before Santiago's residency ended, "I think your mother would have been proud of you." "Which mother, Dad?" Santiago smirked. "The one you made up." "Exactly that one. Because you became the man I always hoped you'd be, a doctor who heals not just bodies, but souls." A week before Santiago's final thesis defense, Diego asked him to come home early. "I need to talk to you," he said seriously. They sat in the garden, just like years ago, when they planned their future with the money kind strangers had donated. "Son, tomorrow you'll officially be a doctor. And I want to tell you, you've exceeded every dream I ever had. From a little boy shining shoes to a man who saves lives." "Dad, why are you being so dramatic?" "Because I want you to know, I consider my life worthwhile. All the hardships, all the pain, even your mother's betrayal, it all led to you becoming the man you are." "Don't talk like that. You'll still see me become head of the department." "I'm counting on it, son. I really am." Diego passed away in his sleep the very next night. Peacefully, without pain. Santiago found him in the morning. His father lay with a soft smile on his face, a newspaper open on the nightstand to an article about promising young doctors. His heart had simply given out. The doctors said it had been inevitable, he had lived too long with a weak heart. 3 days after the funeral, Santiago stood before the examination board defending his thesis, The Social Aspects of Cardiovascular Surgery. He spoke clearly and confidently, though in his heart he knew, his father had missed it by only 4 days. "Congratulations, Dr. Moreno," said the head of the committee. "An excellent defense of an excellent thesis. Dr. Moreno." Santiago walked out of the auditorium holding his red diploma and burst into tears. On the most important day of his life, the most important person wasn't there to share it with him. That evening, he went to the cemetery. "Dad, I became a doctor. A real doctor. And I promise you, I will treat everyone who needs help. Because you taught me that the most important thing in life is helping others." The wind rustled the leaves, and Santiago felt as if his father could hear him, and was proud. The next day, Dr. Santiago Moreno began his career as a heart surgeon. The journey from an 8-year-old shoeshine boy to a doctor had taken 20 years. But most importantly, he was still the same boy with a kind heart who simply wanted to help people. 8 years later, Dr. Santiago Moreno walked down the corridor of San Rafael Cardiology Center, the most prestigious private clinic in the country. At 30 years old, he was the head of the cardiovascular surgery department, the author of dozens of scientific papers, and the surgeon trusted with the most complex cases. Today had been particularly intense, a coronary artery bypass on an elderly patient with severe vessel damage. The surgery lasted 7 hours but was successful. "Dr. Moreno," the head nurse stopped him, "a woman is asking for you. She says she knows you personally." "Who is she?" "From the cleaning staff. Valentina, I believe. She's been working here as a janitor for about 6 months." Santiago frowned. Valentina wasn't an uncommon name, but something about it made him uneasy. "Where is she?" "In the storage room on the first floor." Santiago took the elevator down, wondering who it might be. The storage room was small, lined with shelves of cleaning supplies and equipment. Standing by the buckets was a woman in her 50s. Gray hair, a tired face, hands rough from years of labor. She wore a blue janitor's uniform and nervously twisted a rag in her fingers. When she turned around, Santiago felt a cold knot twist in his stomach. Those eyes, he had seen them before, in an old photograph his father had shown him as a child. "Hello, Santiago," the woman said softly. "Valentina Herrera," he replied, using her maiden name. Even now, he couldn't bring himself to call her mother. You recognized me." "Hard not to. You've barely changed." Santiago's voice was even, cold. "What are you doing here?" "Working. I've been cleaning this clinic for 6 months now." "I'm not asking about your job. I'm asking why you're here, in this clinic, specifically." Valentina lowered her eyes. I knew you worked here. I read about you in the newspapers, saw your photo. Dr. Santiago Moreno, leading cardiac surgeon, I was proud." "Proud?" He cut her off. "You? Proud?" "Yes. You became someone I could only dream of. Successful, respected. I became who I am because of my father. Alone. Without you. I know. That's why I never dared approach. But I wanted to be close, even from a distance. To see you." Santiago looked at the woman in front of him and felt only emptiness. He had imagined this moment for years, how he would react, what he would say if he ever saw her again. And now he just stared at a worn-out janitor and felt nothing. No anger. No pain. No joy. "How long have you been watching me?" he asked. "I read every article about you. I knew when you got into medical school, when you graduated, when you became head of the department." Valentina's voice trembled. "I wanted to come to Diego's funeral, but I didn't dare." "Good choice. You didn't belong there." "Santiago, I understand you hate me." "No," he said calmly. "I don't hate you. You only hate someone who once mattered. And you, to me, are no one." Those words struck harder than any shout. Valentina gripped the shelf to keep from falling. "Please, just hear me out. I was young, foolish." "Not foolish," Santiago interrupted, and for the first time, there was steel in his voice. "You were calculating. You knew exactly what you were doing when you took that loan. You knew my father would be the one to pay for your debt. You knew the bank could take our home." Valentina lowered her eyes, unable to meet his gaze. "You disappeared with that money," Santiago continued coldly. "And dumped all the consequences on my father, left him alone with a baby in his arms." "Santiago. Because of your debt, my father spent 8 years paying off gangsters. 8 years working 3 jobs. He was beaten in front of my eyes. And I started stealing when I was 8, just to find money for your debts." Every word hit Valentina like a blow. She listened in horror, unable to grasp the full weight of what she had done. "My father died at 50 from a failing heart," Santiago went on, his voice like ice. "His heart couldn't withstand the years of poverty and stress. Stress caused by the debts you dumped on him. You killed him, Valentina. Slowly, but you killed him." "What have I done?" Valentina whispered, clutching the shelf for support. "God, what have I done?" "Exactly," Santiago said coldly. "Now you understand. But understanding doesn't change anything." "But I'm your mother." "No," he said firmly. "I had a mother. She was a doctor who worked in Africa, saving children from epidemics. My father told me about her. And you're just a cleaning lady named Valentina. But you know the truth. Diego told you." Diego told me about a woman who betrayed us. Who left her family twice and stole their money. But that woman disappeared 28 years ago. And standing in front of me now is a stranger in a janitor's uniform. Exactly what she wanted when she was 18. She wanted the good life. There was no anger in Santiago's voice now, only exhaustion. How did that work out for you? Terribly, Valentina whispered. That merchant dumped me after a year. I bounced from man to man, trying to find someone who'd give me everything I dreamed of. And in the end, she looked down at her uniform. In the end, I squandered everything and became a janitor at 50. Fitting, Santiago said quietly. Santiago. I know I have no right to ask forgiveness. But maybe we could try, to be a family. He looked at her for a long moment. And Valentina saw something in his eyes that made her heart clench. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't contempt. It was indifference. Total, absolute indifference. I already had a family, Santiago said at last. My father and I. We did just fine on our own. And now I have my work, my patients who need me. There's no room for you in my life. But I could. What? What could you possibly give me? Santiago didn't raise his voice, but each word struck like a blow. I have a home, money, the respect of my colleagues. I save lives every day. What could you add to that? A mother's love. Too late. 28 years too late. Valentina sobbed openly, without shame. I understand. I understand I've lost you forever. But maybe you could at least let me be proud of you from afar. Just know that my son became a great doctor. Santiago thought for a moment. Then he slowly shook his head. I won't take revenge. I won't ask for you to be fired. You can stay here if you want. But remember, there is nothing between us. You're just a hospital employee, and I'm the head of the department. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for at least that. Don't thank me. I'm not doing this out of kindness toward you, but out of respect for my father's memory. He taught me not to seek revenge. But he also taught me never to forget, good or evil. Santiago turned to leave, but paused at the door. One more thing. Don't try to talk to me. Don't try to accidentally run into me in the halls. We are strangers, and that's how it will stay. He walked out, leaving Valentina alone among the buckets and mops. She sank onto a stool and wept, realizing she had lost her son, completely and irreversibly. Santiago returned to his office and sat at his desk. The meeting he had subconsciously anticipated his whole life had finally happened. And it felt empty. That woman no longer had any power to hurt him. Time and his father's love had healed all wounds. He pulled open a drawer and took out an old photograph, the only one of him and his father together. Diego was holding him in his arms, both of them smiling at the camera. Thank you, Papa, Santiago said quietly. You gave me everything a parent should. And most of all, you taught me how to be stronger than pain. Outside, the sun was setting, and the night shift was beginning in the cardiology wing. Somewhere downstairs, Valentina the janitor was mopping the floors, thinking about the son she had lost forever. And Dr. Santiago Moreno was preparing for tomorrow's surgeries. Several months had passed. The call came in at 2 a.m. Santiago was asleep at home after a grueling day, 3 surgeries back to back, but the phone cut through the silence like a blade. Dr. Moreno, we need you at the clinic urgently, came the anxious voice of the night nurse. A patient has just come in with a massive heart attack. Cardiogenic shock. Immediate surgery required. I'm on my way, Santiago replied, already on his feet, moving with practiced precision. Prep the ore. The drive to the clinic took 15 minutes. The ICU was tense, staff buzzed around the new patient, monitors beeped out warning tones. What do we have? Santiago asked, approaching the gurney. Male, 62 years old. Extensive anterior wall infarction of the left ventricle, reported cardiologist Maria Fernandez. Blood pressure critical, unstable heart rhythm. If we don't operate within the hour. Santiago nodded and leaned over the patient to assess him. And froze. Lying on the gurney was Ricardo Montenegro. Older, thinner, his hair now completely gray, deep wrinkles etched across his face, but unmistakably him. The same man who had humiliated an 8-year-old boy outside a shopping mall 22 years ago. Doctor, is something wrong? Maria asked, sensing his hesitation. Santiago said nothing, staring at the face of the man who had once been his tormentor. Ricardo was unconscious, struggling to breathe, his skin tinged a sickly blue. Without surgery, he would be dead within the hour. Dr. Moreno? The nurse repeated. His name, what's his last name? Santiago asked, though he already knew. Ricardo Montenegro. Former restaurateur. Brought in from San Pedro. San Pedro, one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. So life really had brought Ricardo low. Does he have any family? Wife left him 3 years ago. Son's in prison. He's alone. Santiago looked at the monitor. The heart rhythm was deteriorating rapidly. In just a few minutes, it would be too late. Doctor, we need a decision, Maria urged. Every second counts. In his mind, a flood of memories rushed in. The 8-year-old boy. Crushed coins. Tears of humiliation. The Montenegro family, laughing as they trampled a poor child's dignity. The years of poverty that followed. Then came other memories. His father, teaching him to forgive. The oath he took when he received his medical degree. The hundreds of patients whose lives he had saved over the years. Prep the operating room, he said firmly. Now. In the OR, Santiago worked with perfect focus. Coronary artery bypass, triple vessel stenting, myocardial repair, it was an exceptionally complex procedure. Pressure dropping, the anesthesiologist reported. I see it. Increase the adrenaline dose. Arrhythmia worsening. Keep the defibrillator ready. The operation lasted 6 hours. Several times Ricardo's heart stopped, and Santiago had to shock it back to life with electric pulses. But he didn't give up. His hands moved precisely, calmly, as if he were operating on the most precious person in the world. Heart rhythm stabilizing, the anesthesiologist finally said with relief. Blood pressure holding steady. Operation complete, Santiago announced, removing his gloves. Take him to ICU. Ricardo regained consciousness 2 days later. Santiago was checking his vitals when the patient opened his eyes. Where am I? Ricardo croaked. San Rafael Cardiology Center. You suffered a major heart attack and underwent emergency surgery. Ricardo tried to focus on the name tag clipped to the doctor's coat, Dr. Santiago Moreno, head of cardiac surgery. Santiago Moreno, he whispered, and suddenly went even paler. Is it you? That boy? Yes, Santiago answered calmly. The same shoeshine boy. God. Ricardo closed his eyes. Am I dying? No. The operation was successful. If you follow instructions and take your medications, you'll live many more years. But why? Ricardo's voice trembled with disbelief. Why did you save me? Santiago considered his answer. Because I'm a doctor. And a doctor helps anyone in need. But I humiliated you. Mocked you. My son stomped on your money. Yes, all of that happened. You could have taken revenge. You could have refused to operate. I could have, Santiago agreed. But then I would have stopped being a doctor. And my father wouldn't have wanted that. Ricardo fell silent, trying to process the words. You know, he said at last, I lost everything because of that video. My business, my family, my home. The last few years I lived in the same kind of poverty you endured as a child. And I understood. I understood how terrifying it is to be helpless. Do you regret what you did? Santiago asked. Yes. But not because of the money. I regret the pain I caused a child. That's unforgivable. Santiago nodded. Forgiveness is a choice made by the one who was hurt. Not a right claimed by the one who hurt them. So you don't forgive me? I don't hold a grudge, Señor Montenegro. You're a patient, and I'm treating you. That's enough. Ricardo looked at the man standing before him, the boy he had once humiliated, now the doctor who had saved his life. How did you become this kind of person? He whispered. After everything we did to you. I was raised by a good man, Santiago replied. He taught me to be stronger than pain and wiser than revenge. Your father? Yes. He died 8 years ago. But everything he taught me lives on inside me. Ricardo closed his eyes. I wish I could ask his forgiveness, too. I think he would have forgiven you. He had a very kind heart. And you? Santiago paused. I have hands that heal. And that's enough.